We need to make sure that when we think about some of the activity within the markets, that there are periods of healthy consolidation and healthy correction. We saw that earlier this year in January with DeepSeek. We saw that also in April around some of the tariff concerns. And even if we look over the arc of the last couple of years, you have seen significant double-digit drawdowns, sometimes in some of these individual stocks, sometimes in the cohort around either the Mag 7 or the AI trade. I think that is a healthy thing. Even within the scheme of a longer bull market in some of these stocks, you're still going to have these periods of volatility, and investors need to be prepared around that and have that cushioning in their portfolio for when we do see days like this in certain stocks. Even if this is a longer bull trend, we do have to remind ourselves that this can be cyclical. There's a chip cycle, there's a CapEx cycle. There are going to be fits and starts in terms of how the competitive landscape and the competitive moats change. So in that regard, having a good sense of diversification within the AI theme and beyond the AI theme will be important. We should expect days like this.
We're about 2/3 of the way through earnings, the S&P 500. What have you taken? What's been your takeaway so far?
The standout to me has been around financials, because we have seen that financials has been one of the biggest contributors to upside EPS, and all of the subsectors have actually had double-digit growth. So that has been a standout outside of tech, and I think it's one of the few areas of the market that is not embedded in the AI trade, because you do see areas like industrials and utilities as good ways to diversify along the AI spectrum, but it's not outside of the realm of AI. And you're still seeing that the macro fundamentals they are seeing, the financials companies are solid. They are exposed to consumers all along the income spectrum and still feel confident about the state of the economy. And the enthusiasm about deregulation, even if it's been passive deregulation thus far, has been helpful. So that's my big takeaway, contributing to this 4-quarter now streak of double-digit earnings growth within the market.
Yeah, I mean, we got some pretty solid earnings numbers. We got a Fed that's cutting. It's not surprising to see this market marching higher despite the pullback we're seeing here today. Mira Panda, thank you so much for joining us. Mira Panda, global market strategist, JP Morgan Asset Management, moving into the new building in 3 weeks.
Come back and let us know what it's like.
Yeah, let us know what it's like. Let us know what the food's like and all that kind of stuff. With our news in New York City, here's John Tucker.
All right, Paul, on this election day comes word of the death of a major political figure. Former Vice President Dick Cheney is dead at the age of 84. The reported cause of death listed as complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. Cheney became a fierce critic of Donald Trump later in life. President Trump is stepping into the race for New York City mayor, endorsing independent candidate and former governor Andrew Cuomo. Trump calling the Democratic Socialism frontrunners or Mamdani a communist and threatening to withhold some federal funds from the city if Mamdani is elected. Mamdani didn't seem at all fazed by that.
The MAGA movement's embrace of Andrew Cuomo is reflective of Donald Trump's understanding that this would be the best mayor for him.
Well, despite Trump's endorsement, Cuomo promised to defend the city from President Trump.
I can stand up to Trump. Trump will go through Mamdani like a hot knife through butter.
Republican candidate Curtis Lee was still on the ballot despite calls to drop out of the race. In California, voters deciding on Proposition 50. That's a ballot question that would take the state's independently drawn congressional map and replace it with one from the Democratic-controlled legislature. Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom spearheading that effort.
Prop 50 is not about drawing lines on a map. It is about holding the line to what makes us who we are.
California Governor Gavin Newsom's push could erase up to 5 Republican-held districts and offset redistricting efforts in Texas and other Republican-led states. More than $100 million have been spent on TV and cable ads in the Prop 50 campaign. More than 2/3 of it came from supporters. And the federal government shutdown is now at day 35 and tied for the longest funding lapse in U.S. history. And now, after suspending federal food assistance at the start of this month, the Trump administration says it will comply with a judge's order to resume the benefits, but only at half the level that households normally receive. Global news, 24 hours a day, and whatever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Paul, Alexis, Lisa.
Thanks so much, John. You know, it's finally here. It's almost over, this New York City mayor race. I know that you are not a New York City resident, so you are not voting in this particular race, Paul.
No, but I am certainly getting all the TV ads. Thank you very much.
cannot not get all
And
the
New Jersey,
TV
it's
ads.
even worse.
And we're getting all the New Jersey
Yes.
ads too.
Yes.
So in many ways, looking forward to having these races behind us, though they are very, very consequential races. Record number of early voters here in New York City, more than 700,000 over the past 9-ish days. But today we're expecting more than 1 million New Yorkers to hit the polls to choose the Big Apple's next mayor. So just it's been a dizzying election cycle.
Yep, absolutely. And I tell you, the local television stations, those are the ones that really cash in on all this political advertising.
Lots
every 2
of
years.
political ads flying, for sure. We'll know much more by tonight. This is Bloomberg.
This November, the premier event in pickleball is coming to San Diego. The 2025 USA Pickleball National Championships take over Barnes Tennis Center, November 15th through 23rd. Thousands of players, the best in the nation, all competing for glory on the sport's biggest stage. Be a part of the action. Secure your seats now at usapickleballnationals.com. That's usapickleballnationals.com. Or watch live exclusively for free on QVC Plus and HSN Plus.
You've heard the phrase, the voice of experience.
You're the guy that made the bet with Warren Buffett.
I get that might go on my tombstone.
There's actually more than one of them.
Writing on Star Wars was crazy fun.
Hear their stories on Masters in Business.
When I got hired in 2013, M&A was dead.
I think life and markets are intertwined.
Barry Ritholtz hosts Masters in Business. Listen on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app or anywhere you get your podcasts. Bloomberg Podcasts. Context changes everything.
Want to know how Russian pranksters tricked the top government official?
Or how the only copy of a Wu-Tang Clan album got auctioned for millions of dollars by the Department of Justice?
The answers are out there.
The trick is getting the government to share them.
From Bloomberg and No Smiling, this is Disclosure, a podcast about prying loose government secrets. To listen early and ad-free on Apple Podcasts, subscribe now at Bloomberg.com/podcast offer.
When news breaks across the globe, Bloomberg Radio is there. From the Middle East,
Hamas freeing all remaining Israeli hostages in the Gaza Strip,
to Europe,
France's president has announced a new cabinet.
And anywhere in the world news happens.
We go to Ethan Briner in Tel Aviv.
We get the latest from Bloomberg's Min Lo in Hong Kong.
Bloomberg's Paul Wallace has more from Dubai.
Listen on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app, and always on Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The pizza market is pretty competitive, and Pizza Hut has been underperforming other major brands such as Domino's and Papa John's. As a result, parent company Yum Brands says it's exploring the future for Pizza Hut, which could include the restaurant being sold to new ownership. Yum Brands' other chains include Taco Bell and KFC. Checking in on the markets. What goes up must come down, and we're seeing a lot of that this morning. Stocks are pulling back. S&P futures falling more than 1%. Investors are worried that shares have gotten too expensive, with the S&P 500 rallying since the April market meltdown. And the Florida businessmen who founded Hooters back in 1983 and sold it off over 2 decades ago have now reacquired the brand. They're promising to return the chain to its beachy roots after going through bankruptcy. They're looking to simplify the menu, focus on local communities, and also return the server uniforms to that retro jogging style. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
On a recent edition of the Big Take podcast, it's not just you. There are a lot of layoffs happening. Host David Gura and Bloomberg U.S. economy reporter Julie Fanzaris tackle the layoff wave of 2025, what it reveals about the state of the U.S. economy, and what it means for the workers swept up in it.
As you've looked at the data and talked to experts, what do they say about the role that this massive expenditure in AI is having on the economy?
I think it's interesting because a lot of companies don't want to necessarily point to AI being the reason for layoffs, but economists can see these layoffs happening. Obviously, there are other macroeconomic factors leading to this, but artificial intelligence has really been one of the biggest ones, and so much so that Federal Reserve Chair Powell had a question about this and even discussed the fact that these layoffs were large and that they would have to keep looking at the impact of artificial intelligence into the U.S. economy.
For many years, we've had this labor market where there hasn't been a lot of churn, and that's been worrisome to a lot of people. What does that say just about the overall health of the U.S. economy more broadly?
When people hear that, there is low firing and then also low hiring, they think that that's a good thing. But in reality, it's not, because then people who are out of work are finding difficulty getting into work. Young workers are having difficulty climbing the corporate ladder because they're not able to find other opportunities. And so the Fed and economists are very worried about this economy where there is low churn. And that is because that is a sign of a cooling economy. As you said, the Federal Reserve has been keeping an eye on the labor market mandate. And in recent meetings, Jerome Powell actually mentioned the layoffs as something they have to keep a close eye on. And even though economists and the Fed don't have the data to guide them to see if that is really impacting unemployment levels and jobless claims on a numerical, if it's actually moving the needle, they have to keep a close eye on this. And it is because of the fact that now this low hire, low fire environment might be switching over to a low hire, more fire environment.
That's what's on a recent edition of the Big Take podcast. Listen to the full episode on Apple, Spotify, the Bloomberg Business app, or anywhere you get your podcasts.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, we got Alexis Christophers, Paul Sweeney, and Lisa Mateo live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. It is time for Stock Movers. Lisa, what do you have for us today?
All right, I want to start with Palantir, ticker PLTR. Their shares have been down as much as 8%. So the thing is, it topped analyst estimates for third quarter sales, raised its annual revenue outlook. Palantir reported revenue above estimates for 21 consecutive quarters. So here's the thing. Its valuation coming into question, and investors worry if the AI rally is sustainable. Now, a big part of that, though, it's coming from hedge fund manager Michael Burry. Now, he has bearish wagers on Palantir, also on NVIDIA. And if you take a look at Palantir, so the stock has soared more than 170% this year through Monday. It closed at a record. The company has price to sales ratio of 85 as of Friday, the highest in the S&P 500 index. And then we go to Bloomberg's Mandeep Singh. He said that investors likely wanted a little bit more guidance about the following year. They wanted a little bit more sense of what was to come in 2026.
All right, so that's Palantir,
Yes.
big mover. Dan Ives was one of those guys. He came out, I think, late on the stock,
a long time,
initiating coverage, but he was super bullish. And another one that's generally worked out well. Hertz. I am a gold customer at Hertz. That means I can just pull right up, get any car I want, and pull off. So there, how about that?
And
what do you got
know
first?
what? You know what's gold? Their
What?
share, their stock is up 25%.
There you
ticker
go.
HTZ. So it swung to a third quarter profit. It was helped by this lower depreciation. So the company's continuing that strategy, right? They're swapping out the older cars for the newer fleet. In August, you remember they started selling those used cars on Amazon. So that was a move to kind of offload more vehicles to those retail buyers. A path to higher profits. So if you want the specific numbers, I'll hit you with net income, okay? $184,042 a share. That was compared with a loss of $1.33 billion, or $4.34 a share the year prior. So that's as far as Hertz. Now we go to Uber. Okay, so Uber, this story was back and forth.
First, let me ask a question here.
Yes.
Do you guys arbitrage between Uber and Lyft, or do you just go right to Uber?
I just go to Uber.
Go right to Uber.
I know. I don't even have the Lyft app. I'm sorry.
I used to, and I got rid of that.
30% discounts, I find, between one versus the other. It's just random. I don't get it.
Also, by the way, I try to not Uber, Lyft, or any of those as much as possible.
Well, you're a New York City gal.
I'm a big walker.
Big walker.
Oh,
there you go.
there you go.
Good for you.
I'm in Jersey.
Yes, but
we drive.
Uber earnings crushed estimates, but the stock's getting slammed. So what's going on there?
It is. Oh, yeah. Okay. So here's the thing, because that's what I was wondering. I was like, why are the shares lower? So it posted a miss on third quarter operating income, issued adjusted earnings forecast for the current period that fell short of estimates. Its CEO said that miss on operating income, it was actually partially due to undisclosed legal and regulatory matters. But you're right. It was good news. I mean, they had an otherwise upbeat report. Uber's strongest quarterly growth since late 2023. Total bookings, they grew 21% to $49.7 billion for the quarter, and that topped estimates too. You mentioned Lyft. Also, Lyft and DoorDash, they are both scheduled to report after the close tomorrow. So we'll hear from them and see how they're doing.
I don't DoorDash. And no one in my family is authorized to DoorDash as well.
Me too.
Do you have time for iHeartMedia?
I do. Okay, so this is a weird one. Okay, so it's ticker IHRT. Shares up as much as 30%. And this is the reason why. Okay, so Netflix in talks to license video podcasts that are distributed by iHeartMedia. So basically, it's putting it in competition with YouTube. And that's the reason why the stock is soaring. Because Netflix had a similar thing with Spotify where they were kind of doing the same thing. But now there's this apparently sources are saying that Netflix is going to try and do it with iHeart.
All right, very good. Clear Channel Communications, formerly known as. For more information like this, subscribe to our new Stock Movers reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen. Our thanks to Lisa Mateo for those stock movers here. We got futures certainly negative here, holding on to those declines here, if you will. S&P down 75 points. That's 1%. And NASDAQ
Broadcasting 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
It's not really a Mag 7. It's an Elon 7.
What's the timing of tariffs showing up in some of the inflation data?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
U.S. stocks had their best day since 2008.
And Michael Barr with news.
China and the U.S. are at odds on a number of issues.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
All right, Alexis Christopher sitting in for Tom Keene. Tom will be in on Thursday, so I'm told. We got Lisa Mateo here. We got Paul Sweeney with you live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. Coming up, we're going to get the latest on the election. Skylar Woodhouse, Bloomberg News White House correspondent, give us her thoughts on kind of what we're seeing across some of these states on the election and what it means down there in D.C. We're also going to chat with New Jersey Attorney General Matt Platkin. We'll get his thoughts on this New Jersey governorship election coming up. And Gautam Mukunda, Bloomberg opinion contributor and lecturer at Yale School of Management, on Election Day and the government shutdown. So we got a lot coming up in this hour, focusing on some of these elections around the country today, including New York City. Bloomberg Surveillance today is brought to you by Oracle. Attention, growing businesses. Oracle's offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitments, see if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. And there you go. So let's go right into Skylar Woodhouse. She's Bloomberg News White House correspondent. Skylar, it is Election Day for selected states, Virginia in particular, New Jersey, and New York City. How is it playing out? What's the feel in Washington, D.C. on some of these regional elections out there?
Yeah, look, well, it's been a year since President Trump was elected, sort of back to the White House. So here in Virginia, this is sort of the first time voters are coming to the table to sort of vote how they are feeling about the president's policies. The two candidates in Virginia who are running for governor are leading two very different campaigns. Abigail Spanberger, who is the Democrat nominee, she is really leaning into, that President Trump's policies have hurt the Virginia economy. And then the Republican candidate, Winsome Earl-Sears, the current lieutenant governor of Virginia, is leaning into President Trump's common sense policies that he's talked a lot about since returning to the White House. And this all comes at a time where President Trump, as we all know, sought to shrink the government workforce, and due to Virginia's proximity, a lot of federal workers in the state, and also the government is shut down. The government is it's ongoing. Doesn't really seem like there is maybe a clear end in sight. And so voters, are going to the polls to sort of to express how they're feeling right now. And obviously the shutdown, folks are missing paychecks. So it'll be interesting to see how voters are aligning themselves this election.
And Skylar, this is also a big election for females in these races in particular, because Virginia is guaranteed to elect its first female governor. And then if Mikey Sherrill wins in New Jersey, it would be that state's first Democratic woman to hold the job and the second woman in the history of that state. So talk to us a little bit about what all of that means.
Yeah, I mean, in Virginia, history will be made one way or the other. The two gubernatorial candidates are both women. And like you said, in New Jersey, if the female candidate wins, that will be another history moment for New Jersey. If I remember correctly, I do think this would be the second female governor in the state of New Jersey. So definitely lots to be made tonight in terms of history, but especially in Virginia, a state that has never seen a female governor. That is something that's going to make history no matter what tonight.
Skylar, in New Jersey, President Trump has kept a relatively low profile in this race. How about in Virginia? How's that played out?
Yeah, the Virginia race has been kind of interesting compared to New Jersey. I mean, just last night, the president participated in 2 tele-rallies. He spoke on a Virginia tele-rally and a New Jersey tele-rally. The president, he hasn't really been on the ground, per se, campaigning alongside the Republican candidates in Virginia and in New Jersey. But he has been doing, yesterday, I'll just note, he was doing a lot of truth posts, encouraging voters to vote Republican all down the ballot. So he is really leaning into his social media messaging in terms of trying to get voters out. I mean, just a few weeks ago, I asked the president myself if he planned to endorse Winsome Earl-Sears. He didn't give a full endorsement, but he did say that she was a fine candidate, but still sort of stopped at giving her his full support.
Skylar, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your reporting there. Skylar Woodhouse, Bloomberg News White House correspondent, giving us the Washington perspective of some of these local and regional races around the country.
Yeah, I want to stick with politics now and zoom in on what's happening in New Jersey today, because across New Jersey, bomb threats at multiple polling locations have prompted closures, relocations today. We are very happy that he's making some time for us. We have with us now Attorney General Matt Platkin, the New Jersey Attorney General. So tell us, law enforcement responded to these email threats at polling places. Where do things stand right now, and what are you telling voters today?
Well, first off, I want to reassure every voter that we are not going to tolerate anyone trying to interfere with our elections. Voters should have full confidence that today's elections will be free, fair, and they should be able to cast their vote safely. We received by email early this morning a number of threats to polling places across about 8 counties. Law enforcement responded immediately at each polling place. They've secured the polling places, and voters can vote safely. At this time, there is no indication that any of those threats were credible, and almost all of them have been reopened, and we direct you to vote.nj.gov if you have questions about your particular polling site.
How many polling sites did these threats actually impact this morning?
It's around 24 polling sites across the state, and I should note there's no clear pattern of where they went to. They were statewide. But again, I want to thank law enforcement for their incredible response, quickly securing these sites. Again, no indication that any of these threats were credible. We've secured all the polling sites, and almost all of them have reopened.
Matt, talk to us about turnout here. What are the expectations for voter turnout across my home state of New Jersey?
Well, over the past 8 years, under Governor Murphy's leadership, the state has dramatically expanded access to voting. So we've seen significant increases in early voting, in person, and vote by mail. And we hope that everyone who wants to do so will cast their vote today. It's an exciting day in the state. This is a fundamental right, people's right to vote. And my job, principally, is to make sure that people can do so safely, freely, and fairly. And that is exactly what I'm focused on.
And we are joined by New Jersey Attorney General Matt Platkin. Tell us, Matt, your thoughts on President Trump threatening to withhold or reduce federal funding to New York City if the socialist Zohran Mamdani wins in our mayor's race today. That's going to impact, if that were to happen, New Jersey as well, our friends just over the river. How might that impact what's happening in your state?
Well, look, again, I wish New York City is just like New Jersey, a free and fair and safe election today. And I wish everyone well who's participating in that. The president has routinely, and the administration has routinely unlawfully withheld funds against places that he views as perceived political opponents. New Jersey has not been immune to those risks and those threats. We have gone to court dozens of times and been successful dozens of times in restoring billions and billions of dollars of federal funding that had been unlawfully held. Funding for things like, as we're dealing with right now, for 850,000 New Jerseyans who rely on SNAP for their food, for themselves, for their kids, for their seniors. Things like funding for education, funding for kids with special needs, healthcare, funding for housing for our seniors. All of these have been unlawfully cut or threatened to be cut by this administration. So my response is very simple. If this administration violates the law and hurts the people in our state, I've been very clear, we will go to court to protect them.
Matt, I think I speak for most, if not all, New Jersey Transit riders, which I've been a New Jersey Transit commuter for 40 years nearly. What's the state of some of the gateway projects that were moving along so quickly, but now under threat from this federal administration? What's the status there?
Yeah, and I thank Governor Murphy, who has been a champion of the Gateway Project, and deferred to him and his office on the transportation infrastructure in the state. But look, the president made some comments. It is our understanding that the project has not been affected, but we are going to continue to monitor very closely. Just like I was just saying, any unlawful threat to or cut to funding that affects the state of New Jersey is something we take very seriously. And we've been very clear that we're prepared to stand up for our residents should we need to do so.
All right, Matt, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Matt Plankin, he is the New Jersey Attorney General, Democrat, and he is a proud graduate of Madison High School, home of the Dodgers, and a rival to my Summit High School.
Okay, that's
so
why
that's
you know
how
it.
we play
That's
it.
why you
That's
know
how we
that.
play it. So he's Madison, great town in Madison, New Jersey, great high school, and some good folks out there in Madison, NJ. Let's switch gears here. Let's get back to kind of that down in the national outlook here. And we go to Gautam Mukunda, Bloomberg opinion contributor and lecturer at Yale School of Management. It's kind of interesting, Gautam, we've got this government shutdown, but we've also got some elections going on here. How do you put that into context?
Nothing stops an American election. Even the Civil War did not stop American elections. They are as inevitable as the tides.
What do we do here? What's kind of the, if you think about this government shutdown here, I mean, how do you put that into context here? We're day 35, I think it is, something along those lines. And I don't really see the person on the street caring that much, particularly if they're not a federal worker.
Yeah, I think the thing with, and this is always the struggle with anything by the government, is all the stuff that it does is incredibly important, but it's also behind the scenes, and you don't know that it's gone wrong until it goes wrong catastrophically. The federal government manages everything from managing from the national defense to managing nuclear waste. And you sort of find out that the nuclear waste management went wrong when you have to evacuate the city of Hartford. Until then, you hope that it does the job right. And so that is it. But I think the first tipping point is about to hit, right? Because we'll see the huge increases in premiums for people who are purchasing health insurance on the exchanges. We'll see SNAP payments being cut. We're starting to see the air traffic control infrastructure break down. I think, as with many such things, you don't feel it until you feel it a lot. And we're probably just a few weeks away from people feeling it a lot.
Speaking of feeling it a lot, let's talk about these SNAP benefits, because the Trump administration is now saying they will fund partial payments to folks. Logistically, it sounds like a nightmare. Any idea how they're going to actually implement that? And when can folks expect checks? Do we know?
No, we don't. I don't think they know. And in fact, since it's clear from the legal rulings that they do have the authority to actually make full payments, because there are other reserves of funds they can draw upon. This is sort of another of the Trump administration's kind of escalating attempts to inflict pain as a way of forcing Democrats to the table. But just given the geographic distribution of where SNAP payments go, they're kind of inflicting pain on their own voters more than they are on Democratic ones. And I think Democrats at this point are just so fired up and so angry, so enraged. I have never observed the Democratic Party with this level of anger before, that I'm not sure that inflicting pain on Democrats is going to get them to the table. If anything, it may just stiffen their resolve.
Gautam, you say that Democrats have never been so enraged. I can't find a Democrat anywhere that is saying anything to anybody of any magnitude. Where are the Democrats? Where is the Democratic Party? I don't see it.
So there is no single voice for the party. And, let's think, if you think back 8 years ago, right? Like, who was the single voice who was the single voice for Democrats then? Barack Obama is starting to reemerge on the scene, but it can't be him. A lot of this stuff will get sorted out during the primaries, but we're still a year and a half away from that really kicking off in full too. I think a lot of what you're seeing is people campaigning to be that, right? Governor Pritzker is doing that. Gavin Newsom is doing that. You're seeing a lot of people who are jockeying for the first lanes to be the voice of the party, but there won't be one. And I think, Republicans are going to do everything they can to make Zohran Mamdani the face of the Democratic Party. I think they should be very careful if they get what they want, they may not like the results there.
Gautam, just talk to us about what you think it's going to take to bring these two sides back to the table, because right now we see air traffic controllers not going to work because they're not getting paid. We're going to have one of the busiest travel weekends coming up with Thanksgiving if this thing drags on. So what is going to bring these sides together?
So I think there's the combination of three things that are going to happen. One is the huge increases in the premiums, which are going to, they're going to hit a lot of people, but they are particularly going to hit Trump people in red states and Trump voters very, very, very hard. There's going to be the SNAP payments, which is going to be cuts, and then eventually their end, which is going to be a huge problem. And as you said, the basic sort of air travel in the United States starting to come to a halt. The combination of those three things are going to put a lot of political pressure on people. But if you look at from the Democrats' perspective, I think it's very clear. What people say, sort of, the Democratic Party is incredibly unpopular, and it is. But it is incredibly unpopular because its own voters are criticizing their leadership for saying you are not fighting hard enough. So the political incentives for Democrats are to hold the line. I think the question is, at what point does the level of sort of pain and dysfunction reach a thing where, the irony here, and I've said this to you guys before, right, is the Democrats are trying to get Donald Trump out of a political problem of his own creation, which is these huge increases in insurance premiums are going to be politically very bad for Republicans. And Democrats are saying, like, hey, we want to fix this because it's really, really bad, across the board for everybody. At some point, I think Trump is going to fold on that issue because his own voters are going to say, like, hey, these payments are unsupportable. But I do think there's also, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've got just some time left here. Virginia, New Jersey governor's races, how indicative are they of potential midterm leanings for this electorate? Are you putting any special weight on these two races?
I'm paying a lot more attention to New Jersey than Virginia. Spanberger's going to win in a walk in Virginia. I mean, between it being a Democratic year and Doge and the shutdown, like, Virginia is not friendly to Republicans right now. But New Jersey's really interesting and sort of really critical because we'll get a snapshot sense of if the polling data on the collapse of Republicans among Hispanic voters is actually real. The other things I'm going to look at is the margin in New York, because I think a lot of what we're seeing is sort of this need for, like, young candidates on the Democratic side. I'm not sure that Mamdani's appeal is as much, ideological. In fact, I very much doubt it's ideological, as he's a supernova political talent and he's young and energetic in a way that, say, is probably, if he wins by a lot, it's a really good indicator for, say, Raj Goyal is running for comptroller in New York, or even Seth Moulton in Massachusetts, who are the same sort of next generation of Democratic leaders who are saying enough is enough with the Democratic Party gerontocracy.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Gautam Mukunda of the Yale School of Management, also a Bloomberg Opinion contributor. We appreciate your time today, Gautam. Thanks so much. Coming up on 9:18 here on Wall Street, just a few minutes away from that opening bell, and stock futures have been sharply lower all morning long. Let's reset now with John Tucker and national and world news.
And Dick Cheney, the hard-charging conservative who became one of the most powerful and polarizing vice presidents in U.S. history, has died at the age of 84. He's going to be remembered as an advocate of regime change, a policy used to justify the invasion of Iraq in 2003. In remarks recorded before that war in 2002, Cheney said the terror attacks of September 11th justify the U.S. taking preemptive action against a prospective enemy.
For this new century, it's very clear what our national security strategy must be. We must maintain a military second to none, and when necessary, we must preempt grave threats to America before they materialize.
Again, Dick Cheney was 84 years old. You guys just interviewed the Attorney General of New Jersey about these bomb threats at several polling stations, in fact, in 7 counties in New Jersey. Well, election officials operating with sharply reduced support from a federal government agency that had previously helped states and localities counter those bomb threats and cyber attacks. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency before this had abandoned an Election Day Situation Room it had operated for years to share vital intelligence on physical and cyber threats with state and local authorities. Washington, day 35 of the government shutdown, now time for the longest in U.S. history. Meantime, the Trump administration says it will pay SNAP benefits, but only halfway. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Gina Cervetti.
The Department of Agriculture says it will comply with a judge's order to fund the federal food assistance program despite the government shutdown. SNAP ran out of funds November 1st, and the Trump administration initially said it would not fund the program using the Department of Agriculture's $5.5 billion contingency fund. SNAP cost the government about $9 billion per month, so only half of the SNAP benefits will be paid out this month. SNAP is the nation's largest anti-hunger program, serving nearly 42 million people. Most SNAP recipients live at or below the federal poverty line. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
And we're this morning that European leaders, including the German Chancellor and the European Commission President, are going to skip the EU summit with Latin American and Caribbean states, due in part to concerns over angering President Trump. The European Union's CELAC summit is coming under scrutiny as the U.S. targets countries including Colombia, which is hosting the summit, and Venezuela over drug trafficking claims. I'm John Tucker. That is your latest news update. Paul and Alexis.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate it. M&A dogfight out there in the pharma space. Obesity drug maker Metsera has gotten higher offers from both Novo Nordisk and Pfizer in an ongoing battle for the startup in that obesity drug business. So again, M&A dogfight out there. We'll keep an eye on that. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. If you have a Jeep made by Stellantis, you might have to park it outside and not charge it until the automaker fixes it, because Stellantis is recalling over 320,000 Jeep vehicles because the batteries on the plug-in hybrids can catch fire. Bitcoin dropping to the lowest level since late June. Software company Palantir under pressure. Palantir being shorted by well-known hedge fund manager Michael Burry of book and movie The Big Short fame. Burry is also betting AI chipmaker NVIDIA will fall. Full-grown adults are spending tens of thousands of dollars on Lego sets. Wall Street Journal says some are so addicted, they're remodeling their homes to make room for their Legoland utopias. And now that Halloween is over, here come the new Thanksgiving-inspired Oreo cookie flavors, including turkey and gravy, sweet potato, cream corn, apple caramel pie, pumpkin pie, and cranberry sauce. Of course, all of them, even the turkey and gravy flavor, they're all covered in fudge. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
This is... Hey, player. The all-new Hamul Casino Resort is all yours. The hotel tower with some seriously luxurious suites. The super secret speakeasy. Hey, could you make that too? The indulgent spa retreat. Ah. And the epic rooftop pool in Cabanas. It's all for you at the all-new Hamul Casino Resort, the player's place. Book your experience at HamulCasino.com.
How to make spicy California-grown garlic butter. Peel. Chop. Sauté. Enjoy. Yum. That's the sound of good. Hear the recipe at californiagrown.org.
Caroline Hyde.
And I'm Ed Ludlow. Join us for Bloomberg Tech, a daily podcast focusing exclusively on technology, innovation, and the future of business.
We bring you the latest headlines from Silicon Valley and conversations with tech's biggest decision makers.
You have to have a pro-innovation mindset. We were partnered with OpenAI.
We've all experienced this incredible revolution.
Bloomberg Tech.
Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Bloomberg Podcasts. Context changes everything.
Every weeknight, your favorite Bloomberg podcasts are on Bloomberg Radio.
We've been discussing the Federal Reserve's latest moves.
Immigration has become a hot topic in the U.S.
Tune in weeknights at 7 Eastern for the best from Odd Lots, The Big Take, Everybody's Business, and all of our podcasts.
Why we're in an AI bubble and what the danger is.
The Podcast Spotlight, weeknights at 7 Eastern.
We learn about a wide variety of subjects.
On Bloomberg Radio, context changes everything.
Max Chapkin here from Everybody's Business. This week on the podcast, we talk about the movie industry.
Are you worried about the industry as a whole?
Not really. I think you just, if you're a person in my job, you have to accept that the movie business is getting smaller. And I'm a big believer in movies as the great American art form, that it is the thing that we helped to develop and perfect and influence the world with.
Listen to Everybody's Business from Bloomberg Business Week, wherever you get your podcasts.
Take your Bloomberg Radio listening experience to the next level. Download the Bloomberg Business app today and listen on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Get live radio, podcasts, and on-demand news updates no matter where you are, from coast to coast and across the globe. Plus, expanded details on your favorite shows at the click of a button. The Bloomberg Business app, now on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Download it free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Matei. We've got futures, well, turning sharply lower. This is after warnings from Wall Street CEOs that markets could be due for a pullback. We have NASDAQ futures down more than 1%, 354 points. S&P futures falling 1%, 70 points. And Dow futures, they're off about 0.5%, 281 points. The two-year yield, 3.78%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.09%, and that's down about 1 basis point. Over to commodities, COMEX gold down 0.8%, $3,977 an ounce, and we have Brent crude down nearly 1% at $64 a barrel. Bitcoin, want to go there? It's hit its lowest since June as that risk-off mood hits crypto. It's down more than 2.5% at just above 103,000. Shares of Palantir checking back in with it, down about 7%. Traders questioning its valuation. And Pfizer, shares were up more than 1%. Now they're starting to fall. They're down about 1%. It did raise its 2025 profit forecast for the second time this year. Uber, they posted their strongest quarterly growth since late 2023, but it also posted a miss on third quarter operating income and its adjusted earnings forecast for the current period. Its shares down 7%. Yum Brands, they initiated a review of Pizza Hut. The chain been struggling with the competition, and at the same time, the company now expanding KFC's chicken tenders pilot to 10 stores. There you go. Shares are up 2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alexis and Paul.
All right. Thanks so much, Lisa. Just minutes away from the opening bell on Wall Street on this Tuesday, election day in many cities and states across the country. Want to bring in Alex Morris, CEO at FM Investments, for his thoughts on this market. So, Alex, it looks like, we're going to start, well, not too pretty once that opening bell sounds. But is this just the market taking a much needed breather, or do you think it's the beginning of something bigger?
Well, I think this is the beginning of something that will be bigger, but this isn't it today. This is just the market pullback, right? We've been hearing about high equity valuations for a long, long time. We had the Fed come out and sort of say all bets are off for December, and the yield curve went up as a result of it. So there's just some churn in the market needs to come out. We're going to see more days like this, but I don't think this is the beginning of the end just yet.
Alex, it seems like this is a market that shrugs off a lot of potential headwinds, whether they be geopolitical, domestic policy as it relates to tariffs and other issues. This seems like a market that just keeps grinding higher. What, if anything, kind of puts a stop to that, or kind of really presents a material headwind?
I mean, the market has been totally inured and numb now to even pretty major events, right? 10% run on tariffs in Canada, and not much really seems to happen. So whether it's flows pushing it higher or just complete numbness, I think the only thing that's really going to move this is something completely unexpected or something, truly disastrous. We've got a couple elections going on today. It was covered earlier. They seem like the outcomes are relatively well known. You might see some volatility if the Democrats perform less well than they expect or tremendously better than expected. But I think you're going to need something with an awful lot of volatility in missing expectations to get this market to calm down.
Well, I want to talk to you about that next market catalyst. And sometimes it really just comes completely out of left field. But does the Fed become a catalyst for this market? I mean, Powell sort of set us up to not expect an interest rate cut at the December meeting. So to your mind, what is going to be the next catalyst?
Yeah, I think Jay Powell reset the table for everybody, which was probably important. I mean, the Fed pretty much does need to continue its rate cutting policy, and Jay Powell did ultimately walk some of that back and make it clear. That next catalyst, though, seems like it's probably going to come from the executive branch, whether that's, allowing a 35-day shutdown, right? New record about to hit, not the kind of records we want to be making. Whether it's the worst dating show ever to happen in New York City in the election you're having today, there's something that's going to happen where we're going to have a political movement. I suspect it's going to start here in D.C. It's going to come from the Oval Office or what's left of the White House now, and we're going to see something we don't expect happening. But 5 years from now, we're going to look back and say, well, that was obvious. I couldn't put my finger on that, and of all of the presidents we've had in recent memory who would be the least likely to be predictable, Donald Trump is certainly the man for that job. But I think we're going to see an unexpected policy change and a dramatic one come from here in D.C.
All right, Alex, you're staying with us here. We're going to get this market open in just a moment here, and then we'll come back to you and chat. Futures, again, kind of holding on to those broadly negative trends here. Again, when you get CEOs of a couple big global financial institutions saying, hey, maybe this market's due for a pullback, that kind of
I love
gets
how
your
we
attention.
needed them to tell us that,
Yes.
to get traders to maybe take a second look. It's been that way for so long now.
Yeah, but it's been so long since we've had a material, let's call it 5 to 10% plus kind of pullback in the market, which a lot of pundits will tell you is just fine. A correction is healthy for a longer term bull market, as you were suggesting there. We just have not seen that recently. So a lot of folks are saying that wouldn't be necessarily the worst thing, but earnings are generally coming in line or above expectations.
Maybe we can find more breadth in this market too.
That'd be nice. That would be nice as well here. So, and we've got a Fed that is cutting rates. So there you go. We've got an opening bell on the New York Stock Exchange floor. Let's go to Lisa Mateo for the opening of the market.
Yeah, and let's see if we will see a pullback in the markets. We'll start with the S&P 500, and we are. It's down about 1%, 76 points. The level, 6,773 to the Dow, down 0.7%, 333 points, 47,003. And finally to the Nasdaq, down more than 1.5%, 376 points at 23,452. Over to the yield space, we have the 2-year 3.58%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.09%, and that's down 1 basis point. Over to spot gold, down more than 1% at $3,954 an ounce. WTI crude falling 1%, $60 a barrel. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, it's rising by about 0.2%. Have to point out Bitcoin down now 3% at just above 103,000. At the open, checking with shares of Palantir, they're down more than 7.5%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Alexis and Paul.
All right, thanks a lot for that roundup there, Lisa Mateo. Want to bring back Alex Morris now to the conversation, CEO at FM Investments. So, Alex, you say cash holdings. If you're holding on to cash, you should be more alert to inflation. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. I mean, you saw elements of it in the dollar index, right? Dollar's ripping again, and Jay Powell made clear that inflation is coming. We don't know how permanent some of the tariff-induced inflation will be, but we think it's not 0%. And folks who have been long cash, there's $28 trillion sitting in money market funds, in bank accounts, and CDs. All of that is 100% exposed to inflation. We've seen when it comes, it takes a while for Fed policy to respond. And even if it takes a month or a year, it's how much purchasing power do you lose? And, the government also provides the answer to this. It's tips. But most folks who buy tips end up buying longer duration tips, and when the Fed raises rates, that duration cannibalizes all of the return that you'd expect to get. So ultra short tips seem to be the way to go. Sort of an underappreciated part of the market that's really a great spot for cash investors, particularly retirees who want to protect that purchasing power over the next 5-10 years. Great spot to be in a place where we think it makes a lot of sense to be investing if you have some cash needs over the short-term horizon.
Talk to us about high yield or just credit risk in general here. High yield has generated some nice returns so far this year for investors. How do you think about credit risk here?
Credit risk has been okay to good, right? Spreads are tight and getting tighter. The market's pretty well priced to perfection, and every time I say that, it finds a way for spreads to crank a little tighter and a little tighter. But it seems like if you like that 4% return you were getting in the money market, in ultra short cash market last year, you can now ease out into the curve a little bit if you want to find that, or just ease into some credit risk and you'll get some nice current yield. Most of those bonds, are priced at 4% coupon, so you're going to see that, real cash in your pocket as opposed to having to wait for maturity to see the yield come true. But right now, credit risk seems okay. We've seen a couple of cracks, but aside from first brands and maybe some issues in the private credit market that are hidden under the covers, defaults are down, leveraged loan defaults are down, so seems like a great spot, a great time to ease into that marketplace if that's the kind of yield you want.
Gold is down about 1.5% today, and I'm trying to understand this because gold has sort of been rising with equities, which you don't normally see. In the 30 seconds or so we have left, what do you make of gold?
I've long liked gold and I've always had a holding in it, but recent times have just been gold mania. And gold is, that happens in gold and silver from time to time, famously, in the 1840s and 50s in America. But right now, I think you saw gold take off for a lot of other reasons, and then a lot of FOMO buyers who got into the trade. It's going to have to come down some. Rather like the equity market, it doesn't have to go down 30% to be corrected. It could just stay where it is. And there have been a lot of lost decades in equities. If you start looking at 10-year rolling returns, there have been a lot more of them in gold. So you may not see a massive correction. You just might see it stall out and stay there for the next 25 years. And that wouldn't be unusual.
All right, Alex, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alex Morris, Chief Investment Officer for FM Investments here. Again, the S&P off 1.2%, the NASDAQ off 1.7%. So pretty sharp sell-off here, partially on some valuation concerns highlighted by a couple of Wall Street execs. WTI crude oil also down about 1%. That's sitting right around $60 per barrel. Yields coming in just slightly. 10-year Treasury yield, 4.09%. That's in about 1 basis point there. And the VIX, it moves out higher. We're now at 19.29 on the VIX here. We'll keep an eye on that. The Russell, the small cappers, also down 1.6%.
This is your only 24-hour source for world markets and breaking business news. Bloomberg Radio. Coming up, the latest market-moving headlines from Bloomberg. First, an update from our partners at CBS News.
CBS News special report. Former President George W. Bush is remembering his former Vice President Dick Cheney as one of the finest public servants of his generation. His family announced today Cheney died at the age of 84. He campaigned on the Republican ticket in 2000.
This election is about real choices, that we are talking about the future of our nation.
Cheney credited with crafting America's war on terror after the 9/11 attacks. CBS's Nancy Cordes.
He really was a standard bearer of conservatism in his time. He was someone who believed in a muscular foreign policy and the use of American strength abroad.
UVA political analyst Larry Sabato.
Cheney was not just an influential vice president, he was arguably one of the 2 or 3 most powerful in American history.
His family says Cheney died from complications of pneumonia, cardiac, and vascular disease. CBS News special report. I'm Deborah Rodriguez.
Did you know Bloomberg Radio is on Amazon Alexa? Get live business news and market headlines 24 hours a day anywhere you have an Alexa device. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Daybreak U.S. Edition podcast, we discuss what President Trump had to say about the government shutdown in his 60 Minutes interview with Terry Haynes, the founder of Pangea Policy.
I don't think we heard anything new, but I think what we heard was more transparent and expressed more plainly than the kind of the fog of negotiation, the fog of war that we've heard before. What this is Trump saying essentially, I mean, of course, reiterating the Trump and Republican position that they're not going to negotiate the health care extension over holding the government, as they would put it, hostage. But what Trump is saying very plainly is, look, you can actually have a victory, and I'm interested in having you have one. You end the government shutdown, and I'll engage in negotiations with you to actually to make things better, faster, cheaper.
How do you see that playing out, though, Terry? Because it's been more than a month now, and the Democrats have held pretty firm on their position that they want to see an extension of those expiring subsidies for affordable health care before they'll agree to vote to reopen the government.
Well, I see it in a couple of ways. One is that I've been saying this since before the shutdown started. I see it a couple of ways. One is that this is not a substantive position over health care. But until about 2 weeks before the shutdown, it was not clear what grounds the Democrats might use in order to shut the government down. And they eventually picked health care because they thought it was a good issue for them.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Daybreak U.S. Edition podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have stocks sinking. This is after a number of Wall Street executives warn investors to prepare for a pullback. We'll start with the NASDAQ down more than 1.5%, 384 points. The S&P 500 falling more than 1%, 79 points. And the Dow off about 0.8%, 399 points. Over to the yield space, the 2-year 3.57%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.09%, and that's down 1 basis point. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. That's strengthening by 0.3%. Have to look at Bitcoin, too. It's down more than 3.5% at just above 103,000. Few companies we haven't gotten to yet. We'll start with BP. Profit topped expectations, operational improvements, higher oil and gas production, kind of that outweighed lower prices. And Saudi Aramco reported profit that beat estimates. As a boost in production, it actually outweighed the impact of weaker oil prices. Ferrari reported strong third quarter earnings, higher prices, demand for those customized cars. It really helped the luxury car maker push past those concerns about U.S. tariffs and weaker China sales. Its shares are up about 2% in Italy. And Stellantis recalling just over 320,000 Jeep plug-in hybrids in the U.S. That's over risk the vehicle's batteries will catch fire. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alexis and Paul.
All right, Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alexis Christopher sitting in for Tom Keene. His people are telling me Thursday he'll be back in, so we'll keep an eye out for that.
That's what they're telling me, too. So okay, I shall be sitting here until then.
We'll see what happens, see how that goes. I'm Paul Sweeney. We're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. A little bit of a pullback here today. S&P down 1%, the NASDAQ down 1.4%. Those of us of a certain vintage were like, it's a healthy pullback in an otherwise decent market. That's how I kind of think about it. But let's talk to a professional who does this stuff for a living. Barry Ritholtz. He's host of Masters in Business and At the Money 2 podcasts on Bloomberg Radio. But he's got a day job, folks. He's chairman and chief investment officer of Ritholtz Wealth Management. Barry, to me, I mean, this is kind of something we've been kind of waiting for. It just takes a couple of Wall Street CEOs to say, hey, the market's expensive, and there we get a little bit of a pullback. What do you make of today?
I guess my work here is done.
There you
go. We're finished. Hey, listen, markets go up and down. We've seen the major indexes up 6 consecutive months in a row.
Yep.
At a certain point, we just start to get a little bit ahead of earnings. So far, the earnings we've seen have been pretty spectacular. When you look at Apple and Amazon and some of the other big tech companies, they're expensive because they're money machines. They're expensive for a reason, and they can stay expensive for a really long time.
So we're in the middle of, or almost on the back end here of earnings season. As you said, things have been looking pretty good, Barry, but what's going to be the next catalyst for this market?
So clearly, everybody was very enthusiastic about, hey, the Fed is cutting rates again. We've made their lives more complicated by not just because of the random firings of Fed governors, but they're kind of operating in the blind. ADP data is no substitute for BLS data. The sooner the shutdown, now the longest on record, ends, the sooner there can be a higher degree of confidence in admittedly noisy data, but that's what the Fed works with. They're not happy, and I keep wondering to myself, hey, are they talking about a pause in December to kind of urge people, if you want us to keep cutting, we need all our tools and we can't operate, we can't fly blind the way you have us doing this now. So they've put the word out, we want to perhaps pause in December. Maybe there's a couple more cuts next year. That's
interesting. I didn't think of it that way.
Well,
but
that's why we have Barry.
Maybe is a roundabout backdoor way to say, hey, open up this government.
Pure speculation on my part. But, if I was Jerome Powell and I have a president who's been trying to force me out, and I am identifying slowing, not contraction in the economy, but just deceleration of growth. Hey, we're not growing at 3.5–4% forever. We're going to grow at 1.5–2%. Maybe we could cut rates back. That'll make this president happy. The guy who wrote Art of the Deal, maybe he should be negotiating with the other side to come up with a deal. And here's a little bit of a thumb on the scale. Again, pure speculation on my part.
Barry, you and I have been in this market decades. We've seen a lot of trends here. What do you make of this AI thing? I mean, boy, has it been a narrative for this market for north of 2 years now.
Longer than that. People forget, you go back to Big Blue winning at chess, and I forgot the name of the artificial intelligence thing that won Jeopardy.
Watson, is that?
Watson, that's right.
Yes.
So AI has been around for decades. I mean, people don't realize it. It's only since the large language models and ChatGPT that it sort of got thrust into the forefront of everybody's consciousness. Look, the metaverse turned out to be a bust. That was a lot of malinvestment. Whether this is a bubble or not, to me, I'm much more concerned, is this a systemic problem? When you think about subprime mortgages and everything being securitized into derivatives, that was a systemic issue that led to big problems. I always remind people, .coms and the NASDAQ imploded in 2000 and it fell over 80%. We had a mild recession that didn't start, until March 01 and ended a month after September 11th. So when you think about, there are bubbles and then there are bubbles. The Japanese bubble in 1989 was 5x the .com bubble. AI looks like there are going to be some winners and losers, and there'll be some maladjustments, but not a whole lot. It's a little early to say this is a bubble that's going to take the system down.
You said subprime, and you got me thinking, Barry. So both subprime and super prime loans on the rise. Some are saying that's a sign of trouble ahead, maybe a K-shaped economy. What do you make of it?
Well, those are two different things. The K-shaped economy is just an ongoing split between the wealthy, the top 10% responsible for 40 to 50% of spending, and all of the consumer, all of the gains from the market are having that positive effect. On the other hand, I don't know, a handful of unrelated fraudulent credit blowups is not the same as every major bank and brokerage house gorging on junk derivatives that eventually collapsed.
All right. Barry, thanks so much. Appreciate it. As always, Barry Ritholtz, the host of Masters in Business. And another one, At the Money. So we got that going there.
Keeps me out of trouble.
And he's got a day job. He's running some investment firm called Ritholtz Wealth Management. So he does that. So he's busy. We appreciate getting him in our studio.
Where do you find the time, Barry? We're impressed.
Exactly right. All right, with our news in New York City, here is John Tucker.
Good morning, guys. Former Vice President Dick Cheney has died. In a statement, his family saying Cheney died last night due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. Well, Cheney served as the youngest White House Chief of Staff under President Ford, represented Wyoming in the House of Representatives, was Secretary of Defense under President George H.W. Bush, and later served 2 terms as Vice President under President George W. Bush. Former Representative Patrick Mahenry, Bloomberg contributor, says Cheney was the conservatives' conservative.
He embodied the conservative principles of the Republican Party for more than a generation. He served 4 presidents at the highest level, and effectively as vice president was a senior staffer to the president, very different than what we've seen with recent vice presidents.
Dick Cheney was 84. Today, Election Day, and from New York to California, voters headed to the polls. And there's new reaction to President Trump throwing his support behind former Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York City's mayoral race. Cuomo denying it's an endorsement.
President Trump doesn't support me. He opposes Mamdani, right? He believes that Mamdani is an existential threat to New York. He believes he's a communist. He believes he'll bankrupt New York.
The frontrunner Zoran Mamdani, who describes himself as a democratic socialist, has seen his lead shrink in recent polls. President Trump is threatening to cut federal funding to New York City if Mamdani wins. It was a nail-biter national election in the Netherlands. It came down to postal votes from Dutch citizens living abroad. The centrist D66 party eking out a win over anti-Islam lawmaker Geert Wilders' far-right Party for Freedom. And the Department of Homeland Security directing Border Patrol agents to screen all foreign travelers with facial recognition tools as they enter and leave the U.S. The Wall Street Journal reports the move is set to take effect in late December, would also create a massive biometric database, what DHS is calling a gallery on countless non-U.S. citizens. But security experts say it risks the database could become a rich source for deep fakes and other cyber crimes. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Paul, Alexis, Lisa.
All right, thanks a lot, John. And we have got a down market here. Major indexes in the red. The Nasdaq off more than 1%. The S&P down about 1%. Chorus of Wall Street execs warning investors to brace for a pullback amid lofty valuations. Thanks, CEOs. This is Bloomberg. We'll be right back.
How to make California-grown sweet potato waffles. Peel, chop, mash, whisk, cook, enjoy. That's the sound of good. Hear the recipe at californiagrown.org.
In too many cities, dangerous illegals walk free as police are forced to stand down. Join ICE and help us catch the worst of the worst with bonuses up to $50,000 and generous benefits. Apply now. Join.ice.gov.
This November, the premier event in pickleball is coming to San Diego. The 2025 USA Pickleball National Championships take over Barnes Tennis Center, November 15th through 23rd. Thousands of players, the best in the nation, all competing for glory on the sport's biggest stage. Be a part of the action. Secure your seats now at usapickleballnationals.com. That's usapickleballnationals.com. Or watch live exclusively for free on QVC Plus and HSN Plus.
Breaking political news from the team that knows D.C.
A breaking story. Greg Storer, Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter with us.
Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines, along with D.C.'s most respected news team.
Live from the White House, Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall.
Balance of Power with Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines.
We welcome Gregory Cordy, Bloomberg Politics reporter.
Listen live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern. Or on demand wherever you get your podcasts. Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything.
Hello and welcome. This is the Michelle Hussein Show. I'm Michelle Hussein. I speak with people like Elon Musk.
I think I've done enough.
And Shonda Rhimes.
That's so cute.
This will be a place where every weekend you can count on one essential conversation to help make sense of the world. So please join me, listen and subscribe to the Michelle Hussein Show from Bloomberg Weekend, wherever you get your podcasts.
You certainly ask interesting questions.
The stories that moved markets today.
Concerns about iPhone sales in China.
And the insight that will shape trading tomorrow.
Traders are waiting to hear from Fed Chair Jay Powell.
The Bloomberg Business Week Daily Podcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenbeck.
Technology and consumer staples among the biggest winners.
The rally taking a bit of a breather.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Listen live weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app and anywhere you get your podcasts. Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The global stock rally is hitting a speed bump as earnings from AI bellwether Palantir Technologies failed to impress, and also Wall Street execs are warning of rich valuations for stocks. Bitcoin dropping to the lowest level since late June. That's as a whole range of indicators underscore the bleak mood among crypto traders. Ether also under pressure, and several so-called altcoins posting similar declines. And Coca-Cola trying again this year to use generative AI to redo its classic Coke Caravan holiday commercials, but some people on social media and at The Verge don't like it. The Verge says after Coke got backlash last year for its AI-generated holiday commercials with odd-looking faces, the company is doubling down with a new AI Christmas campaign that's even worse. The Verge says the holidays are coming commercials with their sloppily animated animals take even more of the festive joy out of the brand. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
On a recent edition of the Big Take podcast, it's not just you. There are a lot of layoffs happening. Host David Gura and Bloomberg U.S. economy reporter Julie Fanzaris tackle the layoff wave of 2025, what it reveals about the state of the U.S. economy, and what it means for the workers swept up in it.
As you've looked at the data and talked to experts, what do they say about the role that this massive expenditure in AI is having on the economy?
I think it's interesting because a lot of companies don't want to necessarily point to AI being the reason for layoffs, but economists can see these layoffs happening. Obviously, there are other macroeconomic factors leading to this, but artificial intelligence has really been one of the biggest ones, and so much so that Federal Reserve Chair Powell had a question about this and even discussed the fact that these layoffs were large and that they would have to keep looking at the impact of artificial intelligence into the U.S. economy.
For many years, we've had this labor market where there hasn't been a lot of churn, and that's been worrisome to a lot of people. What does that say just about the overall health of the U.S. economy more broadly?
You know, when people hear that, there is low firing and then also low hiring, they think that that's a good thing. But in reality, it's not, because then people who are out of work are finding difficulty getting into work. Young workers are having difficulty climbing the corporate ladder because they're not able to find other opportunities. And so the Fed and economists are very worried about this economy where there is low churn. And that is because that is a sign of a cooling economy. As you said, the Federal Reserve has been keeping an eye on the labor market mandate. And in recent meetings, Jerome Powell actually mentioned the layoffs as something they have to keep a close eye on. And even though economists and the Fed don't have the data to guide them to see if that is really impacting unemployment levels and jobless claims on a numerical, if it's actually moving the needle, they have to keep a close eye on this. And it is because of the fact that now this low hire, low fire environment might be switching over to a low hire, more fire environment.
That's what's on a recent edition of the Big Take podcast. Listen to the full episode on Apple, Spotify, the Bloomberg Business app, or anywhere you get your podcasts.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Emily Christoforous. God darn it.
You know what? It's just too many people. It's a carousel of people.
Alexis Christoforous.
You say it right every time.
I'm
you
trying
get a pass.
I'm trying. She's in for Tom Keene, and Tom will be back later in the week here on Paul Sweeney. So we're here. Virginia football. 8-1, 7-game winning streak, 5-0 in the ACC. Emily Garfeo, cross-asset reporter, Bloomberg News, and proud graduate of UVA. What's going on in Charlottesville? You guys figured out how to play football.
We finally figured it out. This is exciting. One game that's very special to all UVA alumni and students, of course, is the UVA-Virginia Tech game. It's a big rivalry coming up later in the month. But not only that, we also have our eyes on potentially going to the playoffs because we've had such a good winning streak.
It's been that kind of season.
Yes, it has. And we're not really a football school, so it's very exciting. For us.
Exactly.
Enjoy it while you can.
Enjoy it while you can.
Thank you.
First Trust. Who is First Trust, and why does FINRA paying attention to this company?
So First Trust is one of the largest issuers of ETFs in the U.S. Yeah, they specialize in kind of more like structured product type ETFs, buffer ETFs, option-based products. They're not that well known in the New York Wall Street circuit because they're based in Wheaton, Illinois. But FINRA, which is a Wall Street watchdog, has been investigating them for a while now, looking into their sales practices. And yesterday we got an announcement from FINRA that they fined the company $10 million, saying that the firm gave clients expensive gifts, such as courtside basketball tickets, hockey playoff tickets to secure business. This is about wining and dining, and wining and dining happens
darn right it does.
on Wall Street.
I made
But
a career,
beginning of time.
Exactly. And so FINRA, it's actually quite rare that we get a fine from FINRA directly related to wining and dining. The rules that they have about it are kind of gray. So to actually see them coming out and outlining, this is what we found the company did.
So what, is
the
this
fine.
egregious? What stuck out to them, do you think?
I think what stuck out to them is that they had put a certain number of these, sales. I think there was evidence in writing that they had looked at. And then if you look at, what FINRA had found. So FINRA typically says you can provide a client with meals and entertainment. It can't be too frequent or extensive to raise any question of propriety. If you look at the findings, they actually outline, FINRA had found that 2 First Trust wholesalers, for example, gave client firm representative courtside basketball tickets worth about $3,200 a pair. So if anyone on Wall Street was wondering what too frequent or extensive meant, this is basically
I have
FINRA
to think
coming
this
out and
happens
saying,
with some regularity.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Right. I mean, another thing that FINRA pays a lot of attention to, and this is a bit harder to find, is whether the entertainment is preconditioned on achievement of a sales target.
Okay.
Basically saying, we will, we'll give you this if you give us that. And they had found evidence that there were several occasions that FINRA found that First Trust was doing that, according to this report. One of them had to do with a hockey ticket. So their findings say that a wholesaler preconditioned tickets to a professional hockey game on a client firm representative selling $1 million in First Trust unit investment trusts. So again, it's about not only are the gifts too extensive, too frequent, but are they preconditioned? And then they also found that there was some falsifying of expense reports, including putting deceased client names on an expense report.
Oh, that's not good.
Instead of putting, a name of a client who's actually
So you broke
there.
that.
Okay.
All right. Rumor has it that Credit Suisse First Boston had to take a year-end charge after my client dinner at Lever House, December 2004. Epic bill they're still talking about at Lever House. We broke the bank. Emily Grafeo, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Emily Grafeo, cross-asset reporter.
How much did you
for
spend at Lever?
You don't want to know. Literally, they called in. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Broadcasting 24 hours a day. Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, an update from our partners at CBS News.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by The Wellness Company.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez, remembering former Vice President Dick Cheney.
He was a very controversial vice president, but he was a loyal vice president, and that's what vice presidents are expected to be.
UVA political analyst Larry Sabato, after Cheney's family announced today George W. Bush's two-time former VP had died at the age of 84. Correspondent Cammie McCormick.
This looks like Bush-Cheney country.
Dick Cheney hit the campaign trail many times in a long political career, but by most accounts, he was never comfortable with the handshaking, the media spotlight. In the 2004 race against the telegenic John Edwards, Cheney turned to self-deprecating humor.
People tell me Senator Edwards got picked for his good looks, his charm, his sex appeal, his great hair. I said, how do you think I got the job?
It was a style that served Cheney well in 6 congressional and 2 vice presidential campaigns.
Former President Bush calls Cheney among the finest public servants of his generation. No comment from President Trump, but flags are flying at half-staff at the White House. His family says Cheney died from complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. Americans are voting in critical elections across the country. Among the most watched, the race for mayor in New York City. Self-described Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani cast his ballot in Queens.
A campaign that looks to transform the most expensive city in the United States of America into one that's affordable for each and every person that calls it home.
Disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo rallied his own troops.
We need a mayor who can stand up to Donald Trump, who can get the funding that New York deserves, who can make sure the National Guard does not come to New York.
President Trump has endorsed Cuomo. Californians are deciding on Governor Newsom's congressional redistricting map that would favor Democrats. UCLA law professor Rick Hasson.
This is starting a kind of redistricting war that doesn't seem to have any end other than when all the states that can do more partisan gerrymandering do more partisan gerrymandering.
A new climate warning from the UN.
I'm Vicky Barker at the Foreign Desk in London. The latest UN report card on how countries are or aren't honoring their climate pledges finds some slight progress. But it says global greenhouse gas emissions still rose 2.3% to a new high in 2024, significantly overshooting the targets for bringing global temperatures back to pre-industrial levels. The main offenders: India, China, Russia, and Indonesia.
6 deaths are now blamed on a listeria outbreak linked to prepared pasta meals. They were sold at Albertsons, Kroger, Sprouts, and Trader Joe's. Dow's down 213. This is CBS News.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit. Order yours online in minutes. Your kit will be rushed to your door. Get $45 off at urgentcarekit.com/CBS and use code CBS.
Hi, it's CBS health and wellness expert Cooper Lawrence. This is all too familiar to me. You wake up with a scratchy throat, congestion, runny nose, and cough. You know your body. You know you're getting sick. Your choices are tough it out, get sick, take time off of work, hope the doctor can see you this month, or wait 2 hours at urgent care and sit in a room full of sick people. Or open your medical emergency kit like mine right here. I just matched my symptoms to the doctor-recommended prescription. Start on the right meds and nip this in the bud now. This is not a first aid kit. It comes with doctors' prescribed meds to treat dozens of common and serious medical issues. Strong antibiotics for infections of all types, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, bronchitis, and a lot more. Plus, a doctor's easy guide so you know exactly what to take and when. No waiting to see the doctor and no waiting at the pharmacy. My meds are in my kit. Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit. Order yours online in minutes. Your kit will be rushed to your door. Get $45 off at urgentcarekit.com/CBS. Use promo code CBS. That's promo code CBS at urgentcarekit.com/CBS.
People love. Calling all Christmas movie fans.
I'm Buddy the Elf.
You look hilarious.
The skin-tight green costume Will Ferrell wore in Elf will go up for bids next month.
You look like you came from the North Pole. That's exactly where I came from.
The package includes the matching hat and tunic. Tags reading Mr. Ferrell are on the inside and written in blue on the black belt. The London auction house staging the sale says the ensemble could go for around $250,000. Also up for sale is Marty McFly's hoverboard from the second and third installations of the Back to the Future trilogy. Steve Kathan, CBS News.
You might want to step it up if you're at a heightened risk of Alzheimer's. Researchers at Mass General Brigham tracked close to 300 older adults. Brain scans of some showed a buildup of amyloid beta, an indicator of potential disease. Those who took more steps had a slower buildup rate. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS News.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney.
How do you think the Fed is looking at tariffs, the uncertainty of tariffs?
Let's take a look at the sectors and how they performed.
A lot of investors getting whipsawed every day by news events.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Could we see a market disruption, a market event?
Are people just too exuberant out there?
You see some so-called low-quality stocks driving this short-term rally.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
Good Tuesday morning from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City. To our worldwide audience, we're streaming live on YouTube as well, so check us out there. Scarlett Fu, Paul Sweeney live with you here for our Bloomberg Intelligence program for the next 2 hours. It's election day for some folks around the country, so we'll have some coverage there. Miles Miller, Bloomberg News senior reporter. He'll give us some of the thoughts from various spots around the country that are dealing with local and regional elections there. We're also going to check in with John Mowry. He's the CIO at NFJ Investments, get his thoughts on the markets. Brian Egger, Bloomberg Intelligence, senior gaming and lodging analyst. We had some earnings coming out from Norwegian Cruise Lines, Marriott as well, so he'll break those down for us. So we got a lot of earnings coming up. The markets are selling off today, but we're off the lows here, so that's something right there. But let's right now, we'll kick this whole show off, Scarlett and I will, with Lisa Mateo and a Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa.
You got it. This Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. We've got stocks slipping this morning. This is after warnings from Wall Street CEOs that markets could be due for a pullback. We'll start with the NASDAQ down nearly 1%, 217 points. The S&P 500 down 0.6%, 43 points, and the Dow down about 0.3%, 143 points. In the yield space, we have the 2-year at 3.57%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.09%, and that's down 1 basis point. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index strengthening by about 0.2%. We have the Japanese yen stronger by 0.4% at 153.51 against the dollar. The British pound weakening by 0.7% at 130.47 against the dollar. Have to point out Bitcoin, too, taking a hit down more than 2% at just above 104,000. Shares of Palantir, speaking of taking a hit, they're down about 7%. They topped analyst estimates for third quarter sales, raise annual revenue outlook, but here's a but, traders questioning its valuation. We have hedge fund manager Michael Burry has bearish wagers on Palantir and NVIDIA. Since I mentioned NVIDIA, their shares down 2%. Uber posted its strongest quarterly growth since late 2023, but it also posted this miss on third quarter operating income and its adjusted earnings forecast for the current period. Its shares are lower, down about 6%. On the upside, we have Hertz. Their shares up 32%, better than expected profit. Made strides reducing the cost of that rental fleet and also helped offset that falling revenue in the quarter. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Scarlett and Paul.
All right, Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney, we're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City. We're streaming live on YouTube as well. Market drivers today brought to you by IBKR. Will the average global temperature in 2025 be greater than 2.45 degrees Fahrenheit above the 20th century average? At IBKR forecast trader, the yes was recently 6%. Start predicting today at IBKR.com/forecast. Last trading day for this contract is January 9th, 2026. So you got that going for you. We got sell-off here in markets, although we are off the lows of the day. Let's see where some action is with some individual stock movers. And we go to Christina Kino. Christine, what do you got for us?
Well, we got to talk about Palantir, Paul. Yep. Big news today. So Palantir, ticker PLTR, those shares are down just under 7%, 6.9% at the moment. As we know, they did release their full year forecast and their third quarter results. Both are good. Both beat expectations. But again, we know that analysts are questioning their valuation. RBC makes a good point, actually, in their analysis of the results. So they do remain overwhelmingly U.S.-centric, and then the rest of their international portfolio and their performance looks a little stagnant. So I think that's contributing to some of those concerns. And then, of course, they're also in the news because Michael Burry Scion Asset Management disclosed bearish wagers on Palantir as well as NVIDIA. This is according to their 13F filings. And, you know, we know that Burry has been quite critical of these particular stocks, a lot of warnings over a potential bubble. But the thing to think about here is that it's not clear, right, whether these positions are outright positions. Are they part of spread trades? Is there another side that the company was not required to disclose in the 13F? So just a little bit of a hint of caution there over-interpreting this report.
Or the quick glance at, you know, oh, put options. So that means negative, that means sell. So that's another way of thinking about it. Let's talk about Uber.
Yeah, let's talk about Uber. We also got results for that company today. So ticker UBER. Shares not doing too well either. They're down 7%. It was a miss in third quarter operating income, $1.1 billion versus 1.62 estimates. And their adjusted earnings forecast also falling short of forecasts. The silver lining, though, is that their quarterly growth was the strongest since late 2023, and customers ordered more rides and deliveries than expected. So JP Morgan pointing out that the delivery category is potentially a silver lining for them as well. They can grow that profitably because they continue to see better membership adoption.
All right, Yum Brands looking to punt Pizza Hut?
Exactly.
Boy, Pizza Hut was like big time when I was in college in Virginia. That was a big night out.
I'm sure that was a saver for you, Paul. No 2 a.m. study sessions.
Sure.
Yeah. But yes, so Yum Brands, owner Pizza Hut, so ticker YUM, shares are actually rising on this news. They're up nearly 4%. And again, you know, we also got their results, third quarter EPS beating estimates, revenue also slightly above forecast. But as you say, Paul, it's all about Pizza Hut and their strategic review, because it seems that the company is running out of patience. Their sales have been stuck at about $1 billion for years. And so Baird analyst David Tarantino pointing out that if Yum ends up selling Pizza Hut after this strategic review, they could actually add 1 percentage point of growth to system sales. But that would be selling quite an iconic brand, wouldn't it?
I mean, you know, when you're in Richmond, Virginia, there is no pizza. So Pizza Hut was kind of it.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of stunned at how, remember, once upon a time, Pizza Hut and Domino's like vied for dominance in, you know, the, I don't want to call it generic, but national pizza market. Sure. And Domino's has come out way ahead. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, very, very interesting there. All right, Christine, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Christine Aquino, managing editor for Markets Live, Bloomberg News, joining us here in our studio here. Here's like my favorite headline of the day on the Bloomberg Terminal. NYC to decide if a socialist will run the capital of capitalism. Boom. Whoever wrote that nailed it. Miles Miller, Bloomberg senior reporter. He's on location at Brooklyn Bridge Park here. Miles, what's the feeling here about this election in New York City? It's not just a New York City thing. It kind of feels like it's got a regional, if not a national feel as well.
Yeah, you know, I was with Zoran Mamdani earlier this morning, and I asked him basically, how much do you think the margin of winning in this race is important? And he tells me any win is important towards what he thinks is going to be his mandate to get these progressive proposals through. You are talking about a young man, 34 years old, who has put forth some very lofty goals. Free buses, free childcare, and of course, on top of that, making sweeping changes to the way that the NYPD deals with mental health issues and also taxing wealthy New Yorkers. He won't be able to get any of that done without the cooperation of Albany, and he's had some really big support. He has the governor, who was really out front early to endorse him. He's got the state Senate and the Assembly Speaker in his corner. He also has been quickly bolstered by Tish James, the New York Attorney General. So he's got some big bona fides as it relates to endorsements. Will that translate to votes? It remains to be seen. One thing that is important to note is that we are here on Tuesday, Election Day, and Chuck Schumer still has not endorsed Zoran Mamdani. It says a lot about Chuck Schumer's base. It says a lot about where we are with the Democratic Party, as this guy was named the Democratic Party nominee when he won the election, the primary in June, and still some key Democrats not backing him. Former President Barack Obama, another one of those who is staying out of the race.
Yeah, that is super interesting. And of course, that's part of why this local race has taken on this national importance, because it really is a test of what the Democrat Party means now to voters. Talk to us a little bit about the election that's taking place in neighboring New Jersey. There's a key governor's race. Paul, did you vote yet?
Early.
Early.
I'm not going to say often, but early.
Okay. All right. So he voted early. What are the stakes here for the New Jersey governor race?
Right. So you've got Mikey Sherrill, who served in Congress, who's serving in Congress, who's going up against Jack Ciattarelli, who had previously gone against Phil Murphy, and it was a squeaker in that election. He's coming back, looking to win. You know, had spent time in the state legislature, a well-known figure in New Jersey. Mikey Sherrill, you know, is someone who was in Congress, you know, was in the Air Force, but she has not been able to answer on a number of key issues. She couldn't say what bills she would ask, you know, the legislature to put forth, you know, if she were to become governor. She could not explain how she was able to make so much money as it relates to her investments while in Congress. But then you've also got Jack Ciattarelli, who is basically running on President Trump's message and President Trump's backing. You know, that is what that race is all about. You know, it's very interesting. Trump was seen to be edging out Kamala Harris in New Jersey. She did win New Jersey, but, you know, there was a thought that perhaps New Jersey could turn Republican. But when you look at the polling and when you look at the broad base of support and when you look at the number of Democrats that are registered in New Jersey, it does not look like Jack Ciattarelli can win. But it's, of course, New Jersey, and so really anything can happen. But yeah, it is one of those other races that is just really interesting to watch. And will it be a bellwether for the midterm elections? What I can say is that normally the elections that happen the year after one party takes over government is that it usually goes the way of the Democrats. That may happen in New Jersey. That is going to happen in New York, likely. And then Virginia is another really interesting race to see what happens there as well.
Miles, thank you so much for your reporting. Really appreciate it. Miles Miller, Bloomberg senior reporter on location at Brooklyn Bridge Park. You know, I spent most of my New Jersey life in Union County, New Jersey.
Where's that?
It's
Middle?
in North Jersey.
North Jersey, okay.
Union County, so that tells you how democratic it is.
Yeah.
And hugely blue. Now I live down at the Jersey Shore, and you go in a block or two in from the beach, it is heavily red. Very strong support for President Trump. Very strong support for Mr. Ciattarelli. So it'll be interesting to see how this state, which is historically voted Democrat
because
heavily,
most of the population is in northern New Jersey.
Is in the northern
closer to the
cities.
closer to New York City overall.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, it just feels much different where I live now than versus I live most of my life.
Absolutely.
And you really see the contrast there. So again, it'll be a tight race in New Jersey. That's what the polls are showing, and we'll see what happens here in New York City. But again, the New York City race, it's not just the city. It's kind of regionally getting some focus and
Globally
attention.
even.
But yeah, nationally and globally. We'll see how it plays out. This is Bloomberg.
A government shutdown grips Washington.
No end in sight, no off-ramps visible either. The impact is starting to spread beyond the Beltway.
The Trump administration says it will partially fund food stamps.
And Bloomberg Radio brings you complete coverage from D.C.
Everyone is going to feel the pinch if we cannot get this government back.
I think President Trump is going to remain on the sidelines.
Both sides are going to have to swallow something that they don't like to end this.
For the latest headlines on the government shutdown and the effect on the markets, stay with Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Daybreak U.S. Edition podcast, we looked at the key races on Election Day 2025 with Bloomberg Daybreak editor Mark Perrier.
Not only the nation is looking at this is major international news as well. Will it impact on the electorate today? We shall see. It may impact on undecided voters as the funding the funding being cut may rattle the undecided. I suspect that people who are locked in for Cuomo or Mamdani will remain locked in. But again, we shall see how this plays out today.
Yeah, I could say a lot as well about the direction of the Democratic Party if, as the opinion polls have it, Zohran Mamdani does win this race, in contrast to what we've been seeing in the races in New Jersey and Virginia, where you have somewhat more center-left candidates running in those contests.
Exactly. So the city might be looking at a left-leaning government, from tomorrow, whenever this decision, comes out. It's going to be interesting to see how people actually react to this win, and also how the Democrats react to it as well, since Mamdani does not have the full support of all the major players in the Democratic Party. I think people are engaging with them, but again, they're being very careful about what they say and what they write. I think people are waiting to see what the outcome will be before making any moves on this.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Daybreak U.S. Edition podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, see if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. Well, that global stock rally is really taking a breather. Earnings from Palantir failed to impress. Wall Street executives also warning those rich valuations. Because of all that, NASDAQ down 0.8%, 211 points. We have the S&P 500 off 0.5%, 38 points. And the Dow, that's down down 0.1% or 86 points. The 2-year yield, 3.57%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.08%. And that's down about 2 basis points. To commodities, COMEX gold right now down about 1.5% at $3,956 an ounce. Brent crude is down 0.7%, $64 a barrel. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, that's strengthening by about 0.2%. To earnings we go. We'll start with Pfizer. It raised its 2025 profit forecast for the second time this year. That's as ongoing cost cuts really help make up for that slow sales growth that's driving that battle for the obesity startup Metsera. So we have Pfizer shares. They're up more than 1%. Now, meantime, Novo Nordisk boosted its bid for Metsera. We go to Yum Brands. It initiated a strategic review of Pizza Hut. The chain has been struggling with the competition. At the same time, the company expanding KFC's chicken tenders pilot to 10 stores. Yum Brands up about 5.5%. And finally, e-commerce platform Shopify. Third quarter revenue topped estimates, but shares, they're down about 1.5%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Scarlett and Paul.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa Mateo. This is Bloomberg Intelligence. Paul Sweeney and Scarlett Fu here with you in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio here in Midtown Manhattan. And we are looking at a stock market. At least when I walked in this morning, Paul, I thought it was going to be massive red on the screen. And futures looked like that we were going to get a really, really bad open. But we're now only down 0.5% for the S&P 500.
Yeah, and we had Barry Ritholtz on earlier, and he was just saying, hey, it's, these are healthy pullbacks. You want to see some of these every once in a while. We haven't had a big pullback in this recently. But again, kind of a little bit of a buying on this weakness here.
Yeah, maybe some buying the dippers have come in and brought things back up, but there are a lot of people who do see room for a pullback. David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, Ted Pick of Morgan Stanley, Ken Griffin all see the possibility of something in the neighborhood of a 10 to 15% drawdown, given how far this bull market has come. Let's bring in Louis Navalier. He is the chairman and founder of Navalier and Associates, and he joins us now from Reno, Nevada. Louis, what do you make of the commentary that it's about time for a pullback, yet when you see futures indicating a sharply lower open, and we do open down, those drawdowns don't last for very long.
Yeah, and obviously the sell-off is just from Michael Burry's put option disclosure, and I think he's going to get buried. He shouldn't have put options on NVIDIA or Palantir. Palantir had obviously a perfect quarter. NVIDIA is by far my largest holding, and I own a lot of Palantir. But other stocks are coming out with good earnings today. Payments is up nicely. Him and Hers is up nicely. So earnings are working. Now, 9 days ago, the top 10% of stocks in the Russell 3000, 300 stocks, had a 5.73% intraday correction on a mean reversion program. So we can always get hit with mean reversion programs, mini flash crashes. They should all be viewed as great buying opportunities.
In your notes, Louis, you mentioned that you recently attended a Great Gatsby party at Mar-a-Lago. So many parallels come to my mind as it relates to that era. Aside from, I assume, a good party, what did you learn at that gathering?
Well, Mar-a-Lago is a little unreal, especially when they have a big party. Obviously, it was a phenomenal party. Everybody had a great time. I was a little shocked that, he hired showgirls. Okay. I didn't see Melania there. I don't think he's going to be doing that in the new conference facility that he's building at the White House. But yeah, Palm Beach is it's over the top. I live down there, and I just tell people, if you move there, don't compete with these people. It's just, it's just the money and everything is over the top.
Yeah, I can just imagine what that party must have been like. Maybe one day we'll see some pictures from it. But in terms of this idea that sentiment is super bullish and people just see kind of blue skies ahead, kind of compare and contrast what sentiment looks like right now as this bull market gets older, and there are little bits of areas of concern, especially in places like the credit market when it comes to certain sectors like the auto sector or the chemical sector.
Yeah, well, obviously we had Tricolor, we had the First Brands, and now we got a situation where BlackRock might lose a lot of money because of a Utah firm. So, Yeah, that's private credit's problem. That would just cause the Fed to slash rates by 100 basis points. Our Treasury Secretary says it best. He said that 88% of the stocks are in the top 12% of households. 12% of stocks are in the next 38% of households. The other 50% of America is in debt. That's who we have to help. That's why we have to slash rates. Inflation's come in a lot lower than expected. Obviously, oil prices are down. There is a problem with GDP growth. I know it's 4% now. It's going to be 5% soon because of all the data center stuff, but it's concentrated in data centers. And Jason Furman, who obviously worked for the Biden administration, is a Harvard professor, has pointed out that if you back out data centers, we really don't have a lot of growth. But the onshoring is real. It's expanding to pharma, semis. All the automotive suppliers have to make those parts in America to circumvent the tariffs. And the tariffs are largely over. I mean, we just have USMCA to deal with Canada and Mexico, but largely that's next year. But whatever everybody was worried about is over. So it's just time to be happy and party. I wouldn't call it the Roaring 20s, although Palm Beach might be that way. But I think this is like 1998, and next year will be like 1999. And I plan to make a lot of money next year.
Is there an AI bubble, Louis?
No.
Why not?
No, there is an AI job apocalypse, though. You notice all these companies are laying off people. And plan to lay off more. After Amazon announced the layoffs, they also announced 250,000 temporary workers. But yeah, no, there's a problem, and Fed has an unemployment mandate, and they better keep cutting. As far as I'm concerned, I do think we are at risk of a global interest rate collapse, largely due to the fact that we don't have growing households in Asia and Northern Europe. And it's hard to grow when you have fewer people and fewer households. So the U.S. is an oasis. The dollar's getting its mojo back. The dollar strength will offset most of those tariffs anyway. So I think we have a lot to look forward to. But yeah, we need to have this market broaden out. I'm over 40% in data center, AI and data center stocks. And obviously, I don't want to have my portfolios that concentrated, but that's where what shows up. I also have a lot of gold stocks, 12 of them. So, there's a lack of confidence in central banks. So there are places to invest other than AI. But please, we will all want it to broaden out.
Right. When you said we all wanted to broaden out, I mean, there's been, this eternal waiting for Godot, waiting for small caps to really come through and sustain and advance. And that seems to create a lot of false dawns. Small and mid-cap companies, I mean, as the Fed cuts rates, that should help them. But without a consistent outlook of lower rates, what's the thing that gets investors, convinced that there's something there for small caps and mid-caps?
Well, if you look at Payments, PAY, this morning, obviously earnings work. The small caps are like bunnies. They sit, they hop. November is a seasonally strong month for them, so I'm expecting an early January effect, and I think they'll be fine. My average small cap trades at barely 4 times forecast earnings, while my average large cap trades about 17 times forecast earnings. So the strength in the domestic economy should filter down and help them. I'm not worried about that at all. But you are buying things that are illiquid, and they sit and they hop. So when we explain small caps, we always show rabbits hopping around because that's what you're buying.
About 30 seconds left. Louis, what keeps you up at night here?
Just private credit. I have family that works for Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch. They don't sell stocks. They just sell private credit. 2% upfront fee. It makes 1.5% a year trails. The default rate's getting worse. It was all caused by Dodd-Frank. Banks won't lend to you unless you're perfect, above 800 credit score. And it's become a monster. It's 10% of our GDP, and it would cause the Fed to slash rates. Obviously, they plan a certain default rate, but it's starting to annoy everybody, as Jamie Dimon has made very clear.
And you don't expect that to spill over into equities? The issues
I don't own
credit,
financials.
No?
I'm an ex-banking analyst. I know better. So I don't have any financials. I used to take, this is late 70s, early 80s. I could take 2 losing banks, I'd merge them together, and they made money when I was done with them. So I hate financial accounting for banks, and that's why I don't own them.
Very good. Good stuff there. Louis Navalier, thank you so much for joining us. Louis is a chairman and founder of Navalier and Associates, joining us from Reno, Nevada via Zoom. And so got some very strong opinions. Going to party like it's 1999. He thinks next year could be a 1999-like year with presumably falling interest rates and
a 2000 March 2000 kind of event somewhere in the horizon as well.
Yeah, we want to avoid that.
Right, but that's the inevitable question, right? Anytime you talk about 1999.
That is exactly right. And it, a lot of folks raise that question: is this AI spending, circular investing? Is that bullish? It feels a lot like it. It looks a lot like it. Yes, there are real earnings and cash flows with these companies, unlike the dot-com boom when there was not. But that's the concern out there.
And that's why a lot of people are really glomming onto Michael Burry of Big Short fame, making some bearish wagers against NVIDIA and Palantir by buying put options on those stocks. And you can see those stocks are lower in today's trading. And
Mr. Navalier saying he does not agree with that strategy, that he is.
No, he says those are among his biggest holdings, in fact.
Absolutely. So, all right, right now we're going to be checking in with Mr. Romain Bossack, Bloomberg Television. He's sitting down with New Jersey Representative Robert Menendez, again, governor's election in the state of New Jersey today. Let's listen in.
Now from Jersey City with a special guest. Romain?
Thank you, Matt, and welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, television and radio. I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey, with the congressman for the 8th District of New Jersey, which represents most of Hudson County and a good chunk of Jersey City, where I'm standing right now. Congressman Rob Menendez, great to have you here, sir, on a day where I think a lot of people are really looking right now to the State House and wondering whether this is that year where we end up with a Republican governor for the first time in a while.
Yeah, listen, New Jersey and Virginia are the epicenter of the political universe right now here in America. And so Mikey's made the case every single day of this campaign. She came out of a contested primary, ran away with it. And every day she's been disciplined about the issues that New Jerseyans are facing. So she knows there's an immense amount of work to do. She's raised her hand and dedicated herself to New Jersey, to the American people. And this moment she wants to deliver for New Jersey. And I believe that has resonated with a lot of our voters.
There's been some criticism of the campaign that Mikey Sherrill has been running, the idea that campaign is a little bit more high level. It's about national issues, while Jack Ciattarelli seems to be focusing a little bit more on the kitchen table and pocketbook issues, if you will. What are you hearing from voters as to what they actually want? What are they going to the polls to vote for today?
So I think there's two main issues in this election. One is the affordability challenge that a lot of Americans and New Jerseyans are facing. Two is they want a governor that's going to stand up for New Jersey. Yeah, so at times work with the president, but when needed, stand up to this administration. We've seen this administration overreach in L.A., Portland, Chicago. If they come to New Jersey, we want a governor who's going to protect us. And so those are the two issues I hear the most. And Mikey's been laser focused on both of those issues. She's talked about affordability and what her administration would do to address that here in New Jersey. She's also made it clear that she will stand up to Trump. So I think those two issues are the center of this election, and I think she's done a really good job of articulating a clear message to New Jersey voters.
In talking to voters, you hear a lot about housing affordability, but as of late, you're also hearing a lot about the issue of affordability of electricity. Power prices have jumped more than 20% on a year-over-year basis. Part of that's good. I guess that's a sign that you're getting these data centers and other things moving to the state. But when it raises the bills for homeowners and businesses, you need something to address that. What's the plan?
So she's made it clear that on day one of her administration, she's going to declare a state of emergency on the energy price hikes. There's an immense amount of work that we have to do with our regional operator, PJM, the production that we have in New Jersey. And we also have to look at how demand has changed. You mentioned AI data centers. It's good for New Jersey to be a leader on AI, and you need those data centers to do so, but they require an immense amount of energy. There are ways, and we're looking at it in Congress, it's one of the things that I'm doing on energy and commerce, to think about how that increased energy demand, which could be 13% of all energy demand in the next several years, how that doesn't get pushed to our consumers, our residents. So it's going to take all hands, whole of government approach, but she's made that a clear priority of hers, and that's a day one priority. So I know it's something that she's looking forward to tackling as governor.
Another big issue, of course, is taxation, the idea of addressing some of the budget issues, potentially raising the sales tax once again, as well as corporate taxation. Do you think that's something, A, that the governor, no matter who it is, would actually follow through on? And would there be enough support at the State House to see that through?
Well, I think you can take innovative ways, right? Like, I think, yes, traditionally money in, money out, right? So if we need to spend to grow and build New Jersey, then we need to raise the revenue to do so. But on something like mass transit and infrastructure, there are ways to do it where you look at the assets that NJ Transit has that are underutilized. And if you can make better use of them, you can actually create revenue for the state without having to raise taxes, raise the levy. So I think Mikey's going to have an innovative approach. I don't think she's just going to go and say we have to raise taxes because we have to pay for A, B, and C. I think she's going to look about how the state has underutilized assets, how to make better use of them to reduce the tax burden on New Jerseyans, because it goes into the affordability crisis, whether it's energy, whether it's taxes. These are what people are thinking about.
You represent Jersey City, the second most populous city in the state, and really third most populous, really, in the entire New York metro area. It's seen phenomenal growth over the past few years in terms of new residents and new businesses. How do you get more businesses, and not just the big companies, but small and medium-sized businesses, to actually set up shop here?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a competitive landscape. So I think New Jersey's done that well on the film industry, right? We've seen an announcement in Bayonne where they're opening up a new studio. We have one here in Jersey City. We have one in Newark. Government needs to work with private sector, and that's things like giant studios to small and medium-sized businesses. You have to have a competitive landscape. It's something that we think about at the federal level. I know municipalities think about it, and that's something that the state needs to continue to lead on. We want to drive business here. We want to grow homegrown businesses that are at the center of places like Jersey City and make sure that we create an environment for them to do so.
We were remiss not to ask you about the government shutdown.
Yeah.
We're now basically officially at 35, the longest government shutdown, longest full government shutdown in history. Where is the discussion right now between Democrats and Republicans in Congress, particularly in the Senate? Are we any closer to actually getting this resolved?
Yeah, I think we are inching closer. Mm-hmm. But, you know, for us, it's been a clear mission that it goes back to the affordability challenge, and specifically for Democrats, health care. You know, Republicans voted to take $1 trillion out of Medicaid. That's going to make health care more expensive for everyone. We know at the end of the year, the ACA premium tax credits expire. So if you allow those to expire, premiums are going to increase for everyone on the exchange. At some point, it has to stop, right? We're talking about SNAP and the administration not funding it. Well, before that, they had the largest cut to SNAP in the program's history. So the pain has to stop, because we see it every day when we're out with our constituents. That's what Democrats have been fighting for. The center of it has been health care. We're going to continue to fight for that. And Republicans look like they're interested in having a conversation specifically on the ACA. And I hope we get to that conversation, get the government back open.
Are you comfortable, though, with the leadership by the Democrats in Congress in trying to navigate through this crisis?
Listen, we're in the triple minority, right? And so we've drawn a line in the that for the American people, we have to deliver more affordable health care. That message has resonated with people. When I'm out, people say, hold the line, keep fighting for us, because if we do nothing, we will not be able to afford our health care, our housing, our prescription drugs. That's what Democrats are fighting for, and they're happy to see us do so, and they are in this fight with us.
All right, circling back to the election here in New Jersey, I do have to ask you, we've had 4 years here of Phil Murphy. Maybe potentially that legacy continues with Mikey Sherrill. When you take a look at Murphy's legacy, what do you think he got right? And more importantly, what do you think he maybe did not take advantage of?
So, I mean, I think he got an immense amount right on moving the state forward on a lot of things that were responsive to what was happening in the first Trump administration, codifying, reproductive health care here in New Jersey. He's done an immense amount to drive the economy here, from being a leader on AI to tech to film studio. So he's done a lot to grow New Jersey, grow New Jersey's profile. I think on the energy front, I think we could have diversified our approach a little bit more to not bake so much of it into offshore wind, but to really maximize solar, to look at nuclear, to look at fusion. But he still did so much, and I'm really proud that he was our governor for these important years.
Only about 30 seconds left, but looking ahead to the potential results that we get tonight, the polls have gotten a little bit tighter over the last few weeks. Citarelli has really closed the gap with Sherrill. You think she's still going to pull it out?
I do. I've seen the momentum on the ground the last several days. Last night in Union City, 2 days ago in West New York, it's palpable. And people know it's on the line. I think when they're in this final moment, they have to make a decision in the ballot box, they're going to go with Mikey, because she's a true leader for New Jersey.
All right, really appreciate you taking time for us, Congressman.
Appreciate it.
That's
And that was Romaine Bostick speaking with Rob Menendez. He is the son of the former New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez, speaking with our Romaine Bostick on this election day. Let's get a check on markets and the top business headlines with Lisa Mateo. Lisa.
You got it. And we have some worries on Wall Street about whether the market has run ahead of itself. So let's start with the Nasdaq, down about 0.8%, 198 points. We have the S&P 500 that's falling 0.4%, 33 points, and the Dow that's off about 0.1% or 81 points. The 2-year yield 3.57%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.07%, and that's down 3 basis points. To commodities, we have spot gold. That's off about 0.8%, $3,965 an ounce. WTI crude down 0.7%, $60 a barrel. Over to currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, that's stronger by about 0.2%. Bitcoin, though, down about 2.5% at just above 104,000. Shares of iHeartMedia, they're up 22%. The reason why? Well, sources telling Bloomberg Netflix in talks to license video podcasts that are distributed by iHeartMedia, and that would put it in competition with YouTube because those videos would be exclusive to Netflix and no longer seen on YouTube if this does fall through. Netflix also had a similar deal with Spotify, and speaking of which, Spotify's monthly active users, they climbed 11% year over year to 713 million in the third quarter. That topped estimates. Its shares, though, they're ticking a little bit lower, down about 1%. And finally, other news, we have Norway's sovereign wealth fund. They said it's going to vote against Elon Musk's proposed $1 trillion Tesla pay package. The fund actually owns more than 1% of Tesla. It pointed concerns about the award's size, shareholder dilution, also, quote, key person risk. Tesla shares, they're down about 2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Scarlett and Paul.
All right, Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Scarlett Fu, Paul Sweeney, we're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. A little bit of a pullback in the market today, but the stocks are off of their lows of the day. John Mowry joins us here. He's the CIO of NFJ Investment Group based down there in Big D, Dallas, Texas. Hey, John, we started off the day, futures looking a little tepid here, a little bit of selling here as we start off the morning here. What's your view of this market here? Are you looking for, are you one of those folks like, I don't know, Ted Pickett, Morgan Stanley, Mr. Solomon of Goldman Sachs that says, hey, this market needs a 10 or 15% pullback?
Well, Paul, it's a good question. The first thing I would say is you got to always pay attention to where the multiples are sitting. You've got the S&P, sitting 22, 23 times. That's pricey. And the NASDAQ's up near 30. So you are paying a lot. So any news that comes out that is going to, knock people off their, concentration on the AI trade is going to really cause some pullback. But I don't see a huge concern when I look at earnings, and that's what we're focused on, fundamentals. And I would also pivot and say, hey, if you look at the smaller caps and the 1,000 value, for example, 1,000 value trades at 15.5 times, and the Russell 2,000 value, Paul, just trades at an 11.5 times. So I think you've got some good opportunities down the cap scale. But the problem is, in addition to those points you made that came out today, there was also an article that came out on Bloomberg that showed that the equal weighted S&P relative to the S&P is back to where it was in 2003. So the pain trade has been to be anywhere other than the Mag 7.
Yep, for sure. And you are a value investor to the core. You manage the NFJ dividend value, the NFJ large cap value, the NFJ mid cap value, the NFJ small cap value. I mean, we get the theme here. So, John,
value.
Yeah,
you like value.
Clearly, small caps provide value, but they've provided value for a long time, and they've been a value trap. Within the large cap space, where is the value to be found?
So, I think within the large cap space, there's a handful of pockets that we particularly like. Particularly when I look at some of the big banks. When I look at the money center banks, those are really printing money. You've seen M&A activity pick up. Investment banking fees look robust, and you've seen that yield curve begin to steepen again. So that's a real positive for the big banks. I think that should parlay into some of the super regionals and down into some of the smaller banks in time. But I think banking within the large cap space is a particularly interesting area. But then I would also point out that we've got a lot of industrials that are doing quite well, whether they're investing in some of the elements around the data center build out, which, those numbers are really big on the CapEx side. But nonetheless, those are good customers to have. I always like to point out that if Meta, Amazon, Google, if those are your customers for building up those data centers, that's a pretty good deal because they're going to be more impervious to what happens with interest rates and what also happens on the employment side. So I think those are positives. So I like banking, I like industrials, and then I'll point out within the large cap space, these gold miners. I know that's kind of an interesting hot topic today with gold prices hovering around 4,000, but these gold companies in the large cap space and the material space, they've got the best earnings profile of any material stocks. And I think they're pretty attractive here. I don't know where the gold price is going, but what I can tell you is that the earnings profile for the gold mining companies hasn't been this good in over a decade. They're printing money. It's pretty hard to add supply. So even if gold prices sit and hover, these companies should rate higher.
Hey, John, I know for a lot of value investors, healthcare screens well these days. How do you think about that space?
Yeah, it's a tricky space. I'll first touch on life sciences. Life sciences, biotech, these areas got really expensive during COVID, and it makes sense. Everything shut down and everything was gravitating toward pharmaceuticals, life science, healthcare. They got into bubble territory in terms of valuation. And then on top of that, Paul, when you have very low interest rates, that is really good for biotech and funding. With the boomerang of interest rates and the high valuations that you were paying for those, they have been a bloodbath. I will tell you there are opportunities, but you've got to be very choosy. I like some of the hospitals like HCA out there in Nashville. Those have been performing very well and have good fundamentals. There are some pockets of pharmaceuticals that we do like. Pfizer is one that's actually kind of worked off some of that COVID overvaluation and has begun to see real positives with the oncology divisions within their business. So I think there are pockets, but you've got to be choosy. I don't care for the blanket healthcare is cheap, because some of these companies that are cheap, Paul, are cheap for good reason.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you make of the whole Pfizer and Novo Nordisk battle for Metsera? Is Pfizer overpaying here? I mean, it feels like they're both in a position where they're kind of desperate to get the next gen obesity drug.
Well, this is always the game that the big pharmaceutical companies are playing. They wait for other companies to de-risk the asset, and then they go in and, make those acquisitions. I think that if you look at, what Pfizer's paying, it's hard to say if they're overpaying at this point. We'll have to see. What I can tell you is that, given the depressed multiples of a lot of the healthcare stocks, I think that trying to do some of these acquisitions makes sense. So I like that people are being choosy, going through and looking for the smart deals. I think those should pay off given these low valuations that these companies are getting today.
John, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. John Mowry, he's the CIO at NFJ Investment Group based down there in Dallas, Texas, looking for value in the stock market that is very expensive, and it's hard to find value. And it's, as you mentioned, Scarlett, there's value traps out there that
small
value
caps,
investors,
mid caps.
Yep, exactly right. So we'll see. We'll stay on top of that. S&P 500 down 43 points, 0.6%. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
The Fed's top names are on Bloomberg Radio. Fed Governor Stephen Myron.
But I think that the Fed is too restrictive, and neutral is quite a ways below where current policy is.
Richmond Fed President Thomas Barkin.
We're very much focused on trying to land the plane here and balancing inflation, unemployment.
Fed Governor Christopher Waller.
You don't want to make a mistake, so the way to avoid that is to go cautiously or carefully.
For the latest headlines from the Fed, listen on Bloomberg Radio or anytime on the Bloomberg Talks podcast.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Some negativity on Wall Street amid worries about big tech, with software company Palantir under pressure. Well-known hedge fund manager Michael Burry of book and movie The Big Short fame betting shares will fall. Uber shares under pressure. The company issuing a muted adjusted earnings forecast and says legal charges ate into third quarter profits. But Hertz shares are soaring after the company posted better than expected profit in the third quarter, boosted by cost reductions in its rental fleet that offset falling revenue. And if you have a Jeep made by Stellantis, you might have to park it outside and not charge it until the automaker fixes a problem, because Stellantis is recalling over 320,000 Jeep vehicles. The batteries on the plug-in hybrids could catch fire. And full-grown adults are spending tens of thousands of dollars on Lego sets. And the Wall Street Journal says some are so addicted to these Lego sets that they are actually remodeling their homes to make room for their Legoland utopias. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
we have P1 Ethan, who isn't afraid to use the easy button.
Hey, Eddie, this is P1 Ethan. Thanks so much for telling me about AIS.
I love telling the world about AIS. They handle my auto and home insurance, no hassles, and I save money. What do you think, Ethan?
Everything's just been so easy. I know I'm getting the best prices with AIS.
AIS has unbeatable prices, and they like the easy button for insurance. Go to AISinsurance.com or give them a call.
1-800-777-4AIS. To the Minute Market Headlines.
The stock story of the day is NVIDIA.
The trend line is good for jobless claims.
Along with in-depth research on more than 2,000 global companies.
Some of these big tech names, are these entry points?
What does renewables investment look like in the U.S.?
The Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney.
How do you broaden out the AI play?
Bloomberg Intelligence. Listen live weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app or on demand wherever you get your podcasts.
Want to know how Russian pranksters tricked a top government official?
Or how the only copy of a Wu-Tang Clan album got auctioned for millions of dollars by the Department of Justice?
The answers are out there.
The trick is getting the government to share them.
From Bloomberg and No Smiling, this is Disclosure, a podcast about prying loose government secrets. To listen early and ad-free on Apple Podcasts, subscribe now at Bloomberg.com/podcast offer.
The next generation of Wall Street Week is here.
What could be the story of the century.
Bloomberg's David Weston brings you stories of capitalism.
The train station felt like the right kind of project.
Teaching kids, above all else, is a mission.
The hardest business to change is one that's succeeded for a long time.
The new Wall Street Week.
More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Television and Radio, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything. This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Scarlett Fu, Paul Sweeney. We are live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube. We have some earnings out today in some of the leisure areas. I'm calling like hotels, cruise ships, that kind of stuff. It kind of gives you a sense of how the consumer is doing out there. Are they spending money out there? Brian Egger, this is his gig. He's been covering the casinos, the hotels, the cruise lines forever. He's been doing it on Wall Street. He's one of the best out there. Brian Egger, senior gaming and lodging analyst. Let's start with Norwegian Cruise Lines. Are people still cruising, Brian?
People are still cruising. The bookings are higher. I think, noting the stock price decline, that there was a bit of a change in their strategy related to the Norwegian Cruise Line brand, trying to get more families and kids and all that. We could talk about that, but that does have some slightly dampening impact on yield growth for the fourth quarter and next year, which is what I think the stock is reacting to.
So this is the idea that they're broadening their customer base, not just targeting the super high income consumer, which by all accounts is doing just fine in this economy, whereas the lower income consumer and the mass consumer perhaps is struggling with rates staying fairly elevated and a lot of question marks over their job prospects. What is Norwegian Cruise Line's strategy here, certainly compared to its peers like Carnival and Royal Caribbean?
I think it's twofold. I think number one, to try to attract more of a family audience, increase the core customer base of the Norwegian Cruise Line brand, and also by having more shorter duration cruises, maybe with home ports closer to where people live, that could result longer term in kind of more efficient operations and some more, more savings on the net cruise cost per net unit cost side. But it remains to be seen, and I think that's why there's a little bit of caution, because the near-term effect will be a slightly dampening impact on the overall mix of yields. Cabins filled with children and families may have a slightly lower combined revenue yield than a different type of customer audience.
Typically, the cruiser, they're pretty loyal people, Brian. How do they typically react, or how do they spend during what could be maybe a little bit softer economic environment?
So if you judge by the current environment, the overall bookings pace, I think for the third quarter overall was up 20%. The outlook for next year is quite good, with at least modest yield growth. So I think we're seeing still a pretty steady pace of consumer demand. Obviously, that could always change if we see a more severe economic downturn, but the overall pace in terms of bookings demand, notwithstanding this kind of tweak in marketing strategy, has been quite good.
Brian, how does Disney fit in here? Because they have a cruise division, and by all accounts, it's doing really well. They have a very loyal customer base, and perhaps that customer base then grows up, matures, and moves on to the other cruise companies. But how does Disney's success impact the pure cruisers?
I think with respect to Disney, it's such a small relative percentage of the overall cruise industry capacity. It's an interesting strategy on a certain side of the business, but it's not probably decisive in terms of the overall industry, because Carnival and Royal Caribbean together are 80%-ish of the overall industry capacity. So Disney is an important but smaller player.
Marriott, they reported some numbers today. I see the stock's up about 2.9%. Talk to us about Marriott. What do we learn about the hotel biz?
I think the hope from Marriott's perspective is that 2026, in terms of that pace of revenue per available room RevPAR growth, will kind of match this year's 1.5% to 2.5% pace. What we are seeing is that luxury demand, particularly in the U.S., Asia Pacific countries outside of China, are all looking pretty good for next year, and they were in the third quarter. You get a little bit of a bump next year from the FIFA World Cup, which could help RevPAR growth a little bit. I think the weak spots in lodging are probably the limited service segment, individual business travel, certainly government workers. As much as we've seen in other parts of the travel industry, the higher end luxury consumer is actually faring better in terms of their pace of growth than more limited service economy segments.
Brian, Marriott has what's called an asset-light business model, where basically the company, expands its hotel portfolio through franchising, through management agreements. They don't actually own the properties because that's a burden on the balance sheet and everything else. So are there any hotel companies that actually own their own properties, or has everyone shifted to this asset-light business model?
So the marketing strategy or the strategic setup of Hilton, Marriott, Wyndham, very similar in being kind of to a large degree asset light in the case of Marriott and Hilton and Hyatt in particular. Marriott does have a couple of owned hotels, but it's a smaller part of the business. So a lot of the ownership in the business is related to the hotel REIT business, right? So you do have a separation of ownership and management, which is really true both in the casino industry and the hotel industry.
What I like about Marriott, they have so many different brands, luxury brands, Ritz-Carlton, St. Regis, then they got premium brands, Marriott Hotels, Select Service, Court. I mean, Brian, this is an industry that sliced and diced its audience incredibly well. Is it paying off?
Well, I think so. The luxury piece of the room footprint for Marriott is about 10% of the total. But, I think in a sense, if you look at what's happening economically, coming out of the COVID pandemic, certainly limited service drive-to locations are outperforming luxury destination properties. Now it's really the opposite. Yeah. Now what we're seeing is decisive strength in luxury, higher-end properties and leisure business, and a little bit of weakness on the limited service side.
All right. Ritz-Carlton, they love me there. Brian Egger, Senior Gaming and Lodging Analyst, Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us here. We had some numbers out of Norwegian and from Marriott. All right, folks, for our listeners in the U.S., a reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio on Sirius XM Channel 121. Access the world's only global audio business network, coast to coast, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg Radio on Sirius XM Channel 121 is presented by Oracle. Stay tuned for the latest market news and industry research. Your top stories and global business headlines are coming up in just a moment. I'm kind of old school in the hotels. I like to have my room made up every day.
So you always check, make sure you come back. I don't want to
that's part of the whole hotel gig, I think. I don't know. This is Bloomberg.
Broadcasting 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney.
How do you think the Fed is looking at tariffs, the uncertainty of tariffs?
Let's take a look at the sectors and how they performed.
A lot of investors getting whipsawed every day by news events.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Could we see a market disruption, a market event?
Are people just too exuberant out there?
You see some so-called low-quality stocks driving this short-term rally.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
All right, Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney. We're live here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City. We're streaming live on YouTube as well, so check us out there. Coming up, we're going to check in with Geetha Ranganathan. She covers all the media stuff for Bloomberg Intelligence. A lot of earnings coming out. Spotify is out with some numbers, and we're going to hear from some of the big media companies coming up here. There's a lot of potential M&A in the media space I want to ask her about as well. Michael Halen, he covers all the restaurants for Bloomberg Intelligence. We're going to talk to him about Yum earnings. Talk about spinning off Pizza Hut. You got to be kidding me. Pizza Hut was big back in the day. Mandeep Singh, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Tech Analyst, talked to us about Palantir and Uber earnings. Max Wasserman, also co-founder at Miramar Capital, gave us his thoughts on these markets. So we got a lot coming up here in the next hour, focusing on stocks and earnings and Bloomberg Intelligence analysts right now. All right, let's see where things are going. I mean, I got to sell off in the market here. 44 points off on the S&P. That's down 0.6%. So we're off the lows of the day. Let's see where some of the action is with some of the individual stocks here today. Stock movers with Norma Linda.
Well, let's take a look at shares of Palantir. This has been a company that's been in focus today. People have been really heavily scrutinizing this company. This is ticker PLTR. Shares falling as much as 10% since the worst day since May. And this is not because the company reported poor results or, missed expectations. This is actually a company that has not missed expectations. For 21 consecutive quarters, we've seen beats back to back for this company, but people are starting to wonder about whether or not valuations could be too stretched for this company, especially as we think about the AI landscape, and especially if you dig deeper into some of the numbers. And if you look at price to sales ratio on a trailing basis, it's sitting at 85, which is the highest in the S&P 500. So you are starting to see widespread concern here about the fact that maybe valuations are too stretched for Palantir.
Yeah, Michael Burry, his Scion Asset Management disclosed bearish wagers on NVIDIA and Palantir Technologies just days after the hedge fund manager posted encrypted warning to retail investors about market exuberance.
Right.
So here's a bear call out there. You haven't seen too many of them. You've seen Mr. Ted Pick of Morgan Stanley, Mr. Solomon of Goldman Sachs, CEOs there kind of weighing in on maybe some valuation concerns in the marketplace.
Are we in a bubble? That's the question that everyone wants to know the answer to.
Palantir feeling the pain here today. What else you got for us?
Well, let's look at shares of Novo Nordisk and Metsera. So Novo Nordisk, this is the ADRs we're looking at, ticker NVO, and Metsera MTSR. So we're seeing shares of Metsera hitting their highest level on record, rising as much as 18%. And this is after Pfizer and Novo Nordisk boosted their bids for the company as the ongoing battle for the obesity startup has really been intensifying ahead of a court battle that is set for Tuesday. This is really underscoring a lot of the surging interest in one of the fast-growing areas in medicine. So you really are seeing the street really just trying to analyze the current situation. If you look at shares of Metsera, up about 17% so far as we're taking a look, and Novo Nordisk shares down about 43% year to date, down about 0.9% right now.
That's a good old-fashioned M&A kind of street fight out there over this asset here.
Clearly.
But I mean, in the obesity drug world, you have to be in it, it seems like. If you're a big diversified pharma company, you kind of have to be in it.
Yeah, I was also looking at Hims and Hers. They're rising after saying that they're in talks with Novo Nordisk to sell its upcoming obesity pill. So as you're mentioning, clearly a lot of people thinking about that space right now.
Okay, one more.
Lastly, looking at shares of Spotify, this company in focus, that's ticker SPOT. Shares falling for their lowest since May, down as much as 6.4%. And this is after they reported active users and sales in the third quarter that beat expectations, but we did see ad-supported revenue that fell.
All right, Norma Linda, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Norma Linda, markets correspondent for Bloomberg Television. For more conversations like this, subscribe to our Stock Movers Reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen. That's a perfect segue into our next guest, Geetha Ranganathan. She covers all the media names, including Spotify, and she explained it to me very clearly early on in the coverage of this company. Think of Spotify as kind of the Netflix for music. And I was like, okay, now I get it. Geetha, thanks so much for joining us here. What did you make of the Spotify numbers?
I actually like the Spotify numbers, Paul. I mean, the big numbers that we always look for are, of course, the user metrics. We want to see them kind of do well on both monthly active users, which are basically the free listeners, as well as the premium subscribers, which is basically, everyone paying about $12 a month for a Spotify subscription. And both those numbers came in well ahead of guidance. The other number that we look for in Spotify results is gross margin. This has been, a constant point of debate, but Spotify has done really well in terms of expanding their gross margin. They again delivered numbers ahead of guidance, both for third quarter as well as ahead of forecast for the fourth quarter in terms of guidance. So fundamentals seem to be really strong. I think the one concern, Paul, that has really kind of emerged with Spotify over the past few months is pricing power. Are they going to keep, being able to increase prices? And this is something that has dominated the conversation for not just Spotify, but of course, for any streaming company. We've seen Netflix, as you just pointed out, demonstrate really good pricing power. I think Spotify has very good pricing power as well, but people are really waiting for the next big U.S. price hike to really gain more confidence in the story.
Geetha, what's the competitive landscape for Spotify out there? Because as we think about the video business, it's Netflix, and then kind of a big drop down to Disney, and then a bigger drop to kind of everybody else fighting it out. What's the landscape for in the audio business?
It's actually very similar, Paul. In fact, Spotify just leads by a wide margin. So if you just look at both the global audio streaming market in terms of subscribers, they have about a 33% share globally. They have close to almost a 40% share in the U.S. market. So way ahead of their competitors. So obviously gives them a lot of, I think, again, we come back to pricing power, gives them definitely a lot of pricing power in the market.
So what's on the cost structure for them? What are the real levers for them? It seems like, I know at Netflix, they got to write big checks to, either license content or, create their own content. What's it like on the Spotify side?
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point, Paul. And this has kind of, again, been one of the pain points for Spotify because, again, this is a music streaming service. They don't own any of, the music, music itself. That's all kind of controlled by the labels. And as you well know, content is king. So this is really where Spotify has a lot of trouble because for every dollar that they earn, about 70 cents goes back to the music labels. So they have very little leverage. They've been trying to kind of change that whole dynamic, that whole equation, come up with more of their content. So a big investment area for them has been, podcasts, has been audiobooks where they kind of get better, profit dynamics. It has worked well. But actually, one of the things that we're kind of looking for next year is we're going to see a step up in all of the royalty costs. And that's, again, something that the street and investors are a little bit nervous about because we need to see how, Spotify kind of manages their whole margin expansion story as those royalty costs go up. So the amount that they're paying all of the music labels, the Warners and the Universals of the world is going to go up slightly. But we still think that they're in good shape. They've been adding a ton of new features to all of their tiers. They're probably going to debut some new tiers. Again, all of that builds to that whole pricing power and monetization story.
And how is Apple as a competitor here? Because anytime I see a company that's even remotely in competition to Apple, I get nervous.
So Apple, if you're just kind of looking at it in terms of share, they are way below Spotify, both globally as well as in the U.S. market. So not much of a competitor from a share standpoint. In fact, they've even priced their product slightly lower. Some of the noise around Spotify and Apple has been, in terms of the iOS and whether, Spotify can kind of get better terms. And they've managed to do that as well. So some of the changes on the iOS system have actually helped Spotify in terms of getting a better market share and getting better economics, actually. So Apple Music, not too much of a worry for Spotify.
All right, let's switch gears to some of the big cap media names you cover. I need to get an update, Geetha, on Paramount, Warner Brothers Discovery, Comcast. Any movement forward there, or I have to wait to the Allen & Company conference next summer to get something done?
Yeah, we really don't know. We haven't heard anything. So just a few days back, Paul, I think it was just before last weekend, we heard that Netflix was kind of poking around. So Warner Brothers Discovery at this point has opened up their books to any of the interested parties. There were news reports that Netflix is looking at some of the financials of Warner Brothers Discovery. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean that a bid is coming. But of course, anybody who, has a chance, I'm sure wants to take a look at the Warner Brothers Discovery, especially the studio and the streaming assets. So right right now we know Comcast is interested. We know Netflix is definitely interested. And of course, Paramount Skydance is interested. But again, Paramount Skydance interested for the whole company. So streaming, studio, plus the TV networks. So this is, again, I don't know it's how it's going to play out. But hopefully we should get to hear from, somebody pretty soon. Warner Brothers Discovery is reporting a little later this week.
Boy, yeah, you think about it, Geetha. I mean, you've got a company whose board and whose CEO seems to be open to a deal. You would think that something could happen quickly, but it's not happening, is it?
Price has been a sticking point, Paul. So
gotcha.
We know that, so we know that, Paramount has come in with about $24 a share. It looks like David Zaslav was looking for something north of $30. So again, it's all going to come down to those negotiations and how exactly he can manage to extract, I guess.
All right. The good news is we're getting a lot of big M&A deals announced across the marketplace here. So maybe this thing can cross the tape too. Geetha, thanks so much for joining us. Geetha Ranganathan, she's the best out there covering the media space for Bloomberg Intelligence. Looking at Yum Brands today, that's a stock in the news. Stock's up 5.6% today. It's up about 10% year to date. Launching a strategic review focusing on their Pizza Hut brand there. Let's break it down a little bit with Michael Halen. He's a senior restaurant analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Michael, when I was in college in Richmond, Virginia, Pizza Hut was the bomb. That's all we had down there for pizza. What's going on with Pizza Hut and what's Yum's thinking about?
Yeah, I miss Pizza Hut from back in the day. I feel like the quality has slipped since then, man. I miss those breadsticks, especially.